Welcome everyone to the FATED Connections Path of Exile Community Podcast, episode number 58. We're 4 weeks into the 3.15 Expedition League and expansion, and there's been a lot of changes, and there's been a lot of emergency podcasts with Chris that have been taking place. Chris was on Baeclast like a week ago, just a couple of days ago. He was joining Mathel's and Zizaran's broadcast, and next week he's going to be on Ghazzy's podcast. Today I'm here not only with BalorMage, but with both Zizaran and Ghazzy, so we can discuss the podcasts that lie behind us and the upcoming podcast, and maybe hopefully can help Ghazzy to prepare even more for the interview to get the most value in terms of information out of Chris. I'm just going to start. Welcome, Zizaran. How are you doing? Would you like to quickly give people a little bit of a background, where you come from, how you play PoE, and all that jazz?
Wait, we're live? No, just kidding. My name is Zizaran. I've been streaming for almost 6 years, and I generally play PoE and focus on content for new players. I generally prefer playing hardcore solo self-on myself, and I kind of know life the game.
Have you always been playing SSF, or is that something?
No, I actually hate SSF and don't want to play. I just kind of have to. I would prefer playing Trade League, but Trade League is kind of unplayable when you play this many hours.
All right, that's fair. Is that because of the trade quality of life and you don't want to go mad, or is it because?
I don't mind trading. It's at a certain point when you have no life so much, like everything is less exciting over time, right? Like if there's a person with like 1,000 hours. Watching like your first Exalted Orb was probably more exciting than the 10,000th Exalted Orb you dropped, and just over time things get less exciting. So then everything is always exciting in solo self-on. Well, for now.
Yeah, well, until hard mode comes around.
I'm very excited for that.
So am I. But that's great. Ghazzy, how long have you been playing PoE, and what do you mostly do in Path of Exile? What do we know you for?
Well, most people know me for my summoner stuffs. It's kind of crazy. I've played the game for 8 years, streamed it for 7 something. Well, mostly summoner stuffs, but most of my guides are spell-based oriented. Very, very limited on the melee and bow builds, but mostly spell builds. Played a lot of hardcore racing back in the days when trade hardcore was actually a thing. Spent 5 years doing that. And then I took the decision to play softcore because I felt that I could test my guides in a better way for the community. And
when approximately can you pinpoint the time of transition into softcore mostly?
I want to say a year, but it's probably 2 already. So around 2 years, I think, that I went over to softcore. Something like that.
Yeah, I have no idea, but I felt it was way longer ago already. But
I spent 5 years almost in hardcore, and I spent the first year in standard, and then I went over to hardcore temp leagues. The first thing I did, I spent my first almost 5 years in that.
But you still play mostly trade for the same reason of being able to min-max guides better.
It's more about testing the builds. Like usually I have one main character that I play every league with either Spectres or Darkbite for the most part, last year at least. And then I have that as a service character that I do push currency with, so I can do crafting guides and whatnot and throw currency on things I don't really need. That's not profitable. And then I focus on low budget build guides, test them by literally throwing the character's corpse onto content they shouldn't be able to do till I put the minimized gear that make it able to do that content. So I can tell people that you need this to handle tier 16, or you need that to do Uber Elder. Lots of depths, but it's worth it in the end. And then I get my hardcore fix through Zizaran's Gauntlet events. So kind of happy.
I've been following your progress in the gauntlets a little bit. You're always doing spicy builds.
I think it's fun.
Not the number one meta approach, but yeah, that makes it fun to see how far can I get with this semi-scuffed setup that would require a lot of investment, even in trade.
Yeah, I think that's also why I'm very excited for hard mode. I know it's been brought up maybe a little bit too much on the interviews by Chris, but I think it's gonna be fun with hard mode as well. I'll definitely be doing that in a trade league format, because I think that could be really fun to push characters in a more interesting way. Gives another type of excitement. Like Zizaran said, with dropping Exalted, it's like nowadays you kind of forget that you looted it and you get more excited over Chaos Orb. It's kind of weird, but it's like you said, Sis, as well before, with no life in the game, it kind of puts a different perspective to it compared to most people. But yeah, that's basically me.
That's great. Thank you for that. Glad to have you on the podcast. Balor, how are you doing? And would you quickly give us the same? I mean, I know you've been on every single episode since like episode 11, so probably people know you, but assuming there's a lot of people coming in from Zizaran's and Ghazzy's channel that may not know exactly who you are and where you come from and what you stand on how you stand on Path of Exile. Yeah, would you give us the same sort of background for yourself?
So I started, I want to say playing like 7 or 8 years ago. I wasn't from beta. I don't really know when. I did my first 16,000 hours in hardcore trade. And then just changed over to softcore and stayed there ever since. I have no idea when that was. It was more than a year. I don't know when it was. It was a while back. So now I'm just softcore trade all day, every day. I actually literally 2 days ago re-rolled in solo self-found for what might be the first time ever. I think I've done like a hardcore mayhem race in solo self-found before, and that's like that was like incursion league. So I've actually not done solo self-found at all. So that's new, and I'm learning that. But otherwise, I would say a large majority of the stuff I do is just softcore trade and economy based. I like making tons of money in farming ways that involve playing the game rather than crafting or flipping, because I find those things very boring to do for profit. I'd rather kill things. So I try and find the best way to kill things and make money.
That's great.
That's most of the focus. Where can I kill things and make money?
Awesome. Well, to just quickly provide the same sort of background for myself, my name's Catmaster. Most of you probably know me because you're on my stream, but in case you do not, I've been playing the game since 2014, end of 2014. Actually, had the account since 2013 when I saw the game being played on Wings of Death's stream, and just felt I need to make an account. This game's probably going to be cool when it's out of beta. And then had some friends who got me into the game. Relatively quickly gravitated towards hardcore because it just felt like it's an endless pond where you can like keep on swimming and you'll never reach like any sort of 90, 100% completion of the game, but it will just be endless fun always. And been loving it. Been pretty bad at the game because I never had all the time that I wanted to play it. And then end of 2017 started streaming as a sort of like internship project over a couple of years. And now I feel I got a decent grip on the game, a decent grip on content creation, and we're going to go hard this year. And what I enjoy most about the game is really what I just said, is the fact that, well, I started in hardcore trade, but quickly gravitated towards SSF when I started streaming because I didn't really like feeling pressured to do the most efficient thing in the trade economy in order to keep up with the top players, but I also don't like feeling behind. And SSF allowed me to play at my own pace and play my own content and still not feel like I'm super behind. Obviously, there's tons of people who are better than I am and who get more things done in SSF HC much faster and shorter amounts of time. But yeah, like I said, I just really like this feeling of progression that I have, that even if I keep playing the league for 3 months, I will not have seen all the enemies. I will not have trivialized all the fights. There's still like a sense of uncharted territory for me, and that never goes away in this way. But it also makes me feel a little bit like I'm worse of a player than I could be. So I sometimes go into softcore and practice endgame stuff. So I do have a little bit experience with the Maven fight and the Cirrus fight, even though I think I've never fought Maven on hardcore so far, which I really need to do. That's probably my goal until Maven goes away, possibly with the new endgame. But yeah, is that do you guys have a similar feeling about the core aspect that you enjoy about Path of Exile, that it's like this huge endless sea almost of endless possibilities, endless playthroughs, or is there something else that you would like to highlight?
Yeah, I think it's like probably the easiest game to get replayability out of. Like, it's really, really nice to grind. There's just so many things you can do. Like, even like I have like an insane amount of hours farming Mephisto and Diablo 2. That's just one thing over and over again. Here we have like variety and similar things.
I don't think I could spend. I think we're up to like 23 or 24,000 hours now. I don't think I've ever spent that much in another game. I've never seen that sort of replayability. It doesn't exist.
I think Usus actually had me beat on hours played now.
I don't know. I'm very like I try to be very under or I don't know what the word is. Underestimate. I try to underestimate how many hours I think it's like somewhere like around 22,000, but it is probably more than that.
Yeah, I actually did calculate it a couple of months ago, and I'm closing in on 27. But last I think I heard about you, I think you were pretty close to 25. So you might actually have it beat.
No. I'm nowhere near 27.
Well, you guys are all playing on the Steam client?
No. Like, I'm mostly going off by hours streamed.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yep. I've got what have I got? Like 12,500 hours on Steam before I swapped over. And I was still playing hardcore when I swapped off the Steam client. Like, that was a long time ago.
Sorry, what did you say, sis? I didn't get that.
He should leave a review, like, you know, like, yeah, I guess it's okay.
Middle thumb.
Like, game was averaged.
Now that
5 out of
3.15,
10.
you'd be like, it's kind of shit now.
12,000 hours played. Yeah, it was alright.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Quickly, let's talk a little bit about what we've been doing in Expedition League, so people know what's been going on. I followed that no logout challenge that Zizaran called out on the stream with Quinn and Mathel.
That looked like a mistake.
Yeah, I don't know. Zizaran, was it a mistake? Do you think you became a better player through the no logout?
No, not at all. I mean, I would say it makes you a worse player not to have it, but it makes the game a lot less enjoyable. You just have to play differently. Like, you just have to like go slower.
Mm-hmm.
And so I still haven't logged out at all this league. Like, even after there's no reason to. I'm just doing it out of spite now. I'd say it mostly affects how you play early. Like, you can like, instead of using, like, you have to use a portal at Weaver, you have to use a portal at Hailrake, stuff like that is like really, really annoying. And other than that, like, sometimes it's just fun and nice to just be really sloppy and click on a strong box, right? If you get frozen because your potion's down, you can just log out. So I definitely prefer that kind of play style, but I still do want the adrenaline that you can die. And obviously, like, logout doesn't really, like, I haven't logged out this league, and it's just like the first 2 deaths this league. The second and third death this league could have been saved by logout, because that was like very, very slow degen deaths. But I mean, generally, like, totem characters are pretty rough to play this league anyway, I would say, especially with my playstyle. So I don't know. Like, what I was gonna do, like, now I can log out, and I probably like would, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna like document how much I log out for the rest of the league. Like, I still haven't a single time, and I've done like Awakener 8 and stuff like that, and that was no problem. Like, I generally don't log out much on bosses except Maven, which I was also planning to do, but then I died to just a random logbook. But yeah, I was gonna just document my logouts and like make an explanation of like why I logged out at the end of the league. But yeah, still 0 so far. I would say generally I log out less than 5 times per league.
That's pretty good.
Mostly early league. When you have no like freeze immunity and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I log out a ton in softcore. Like, I don't want to waste the time to open my inventory to click a portal, because like I will only cast a portal if I craft a trigger craft on my off slot weapon, so I can cast an instant portal. Otherwise, I'm logging.
And I love sometimes people use the argument like, why play hardcore? Why not just play softcore? Well, if that's the case, then we could just remove softcore, right? Because there's no difference.
Oh, I like that.
True.
I like that as a comeback instead of trying to explain the whole thing.
Short and straight to the point.
Yeah.
Nope.
I do get the point. Like friends of mine who used to play hardcore go into softcore solo self-found because obviously when you play SSF anyway, there's no difference in economy because there's no economy. And then playing softcore solo self-found just allows you to play more content of the game because you don't get set back by, if you're a casual player and you only have a handful of hours per day, you don't get set back by like an entire week by losing your hardcore character.
Yeah.
But you still get a meaningful loss of experience, and it kind of does suck at a certain point in softcore.
Yep.
But but about the no logout, I also died a couple of times. But for me, it wasn't necessarily degens. It was a combination of adjusting to the new ailment Flask system, and also to the higher cooldowns on the mobility skills. I died in a trial of Burning Rage because my smoke mine was on cooldown and I couldn't get off the burning ground as fast as my brain projected I would be able to get off. Right? It's just getting used to the new, slower game and less powerful flasks.
Yeah. No, like for me, I would always say like logging out is the same as using a life flask with the way the game is balanced. It'd be fine with like the game being balanced differently as well, but I don't really mind as long as you're having fun. That's the important part.
Yeah. Not having fun. Preemptively clicking my anti-freeze flask to open a box to then be frozen. And then not have
it
any
still happens all the time.
It's 24/7. It went to the extreme. I had for a time 2 heat flasks because I kept having no charges on it. It was so bad. But I think it was like a tie. I think the flasks, like, I think there's a lot of improvements to be made, obviously, but I think a lot of it has to do with us getting used to it, like with the new way of playing it, even if a lot of it requires proactive gameplay, but the game is designed around reactive gameplay. I think you put that pretty well, Sis, as well. But I mean, in general, a lot of it comes down to getting used to it, especially when it comes to ailment removals.
My favorite one was Veritania early league. She'd just put that thing down over the map, and then you just get frozen in it. And then you had 1 second. If you had a flask charge to get out, you're frozen, and you just perma-frozen, you just sit there. You're like, oh no, what do I do?
Yeah, so I actually, on my first character, or actually, no, not my first character, they all like died. Like most of my deaths this day was actually like, the first one was in Quarry, and then just tier 1 map deaths from like sloppy gameplay. And then I haven't really died much like actually in maps this league. But I wore Wanderlust on my first like actual character to level 93.
Wow.
Yeah, honestly, like every time I think about what character I could play, I'm like, okay, do I have Wanderlust? How long do I want to wear them for? Do I have Dream Fragments? Do I want to pick an Ascendancy that gets freeze immune or something like that? Right now I'm playing a Jug. My first couple of characters were almost all of them were occultists. And it's rough.
Yeah.
You look a little bit more for that complete avoidance.
And it's software, everyone plays totem builds so they can get that curse immunity. Like rolling maps have been kind of interesting. It's like
is insane.
Just
Vulnerability is the only one that really bothers me.
I mean, in software, nobody overcaps for elemental weakness. It's like as soon as you roll a curse, unless you're playing a proxy build, then Enfeeble's going to go as well. So it's like every time you roll a curse, like, oh, let's use a scour. Oh, there's elemental weakness. Let's use a scour.
I don't roll over minus max either. So now that the cap is lowered, like now that it's only 100% curses, I'm fine with Ellie Week. Like it's just like a minus max.
Yeah, it's only 20% resist remove, like you said.
Well, I'm like, okay, so like in my Sunday roast recently, somebody for the first time made a montage of deaths prepping for the Sunday roast to like show how they were dying. And this was a guy on Softcore, and he was like, I can't remember what level he was, but he had like a few hundred deaths. And honestly, like his character was fine for the most part. It was mostly how he was rolling maps. Like he was doing min-max, multi-proj, crit, double damage, and shit like that. But they weren't even corrupted maps. They were literally like, you could have just rolled over them. They were doing insane maps.
Gotta save those alchemy orbs, dude.
I don't
The
know.
scours are scarce this league.
They're cheap. Buy like 700-800 for like 60, 70k or something crazy like that.
Well, yeah, if you
They were very
trade.
expensive early though.
Yeah.
Early scours were like 1-to-1. Like they were very
Yeah,
expensive.
yeah, but they always are pretty expensive like that. But still, it's pretty crazy. Binding orbs though.
No. The
Best
real
shit
problem is
ever.
blessed orbs.
I don't know.
Oh.
In Ultimatum, we get so many scours from the Trial Master, and I feel like now Tujin is like very, very stingy with the scours. Like I actually transitioned to buying all the chance orbs from Tujin as well, just so I can trade them into scours.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
So
Yeah.
we're hitting on the Flask thing anyway. And now I'm literally the only one that likes the direction of Flasks, right? Like in the world.
I like the
Yeah,
direction,
everyone
but I
else
don't
hates
like the
them.
state.
Tell me and explain to me why do you like it? Like this direction.
Okay, so there's some little bits that I don't like. Obviously, they didn't give us a bunch of other tools to deal with elemental ailments.
Right.
And so that feels not done. But I don't like, and I don't want to go back to, I just have blanket immunities from my flasks all the time. Right? Like, I think that was very cheap and very lazy. I don't like that. I want to have to deal with them another way, which they didn't give us the tools for yet. So it feels only half done. Right? And I didn't like it when it was 1 second lasting, because that was very
Awful.
gross. But at the 4 second lasting and the way that they are now appropriately strengthed to the point where if I don't have flasks up, the difference between having my flask charges and not having my flask charges any league before this one was night and day. There's like 70% of the power of my build comes from this flask bar. And that seems very unbalanced with the rest of my incredibly expensive gear. Like my flask should not be 70% of their power. And now, at best, they're like 20. And that feels far more appropriate. So I like heading in that direction. I like what has happened to them in that way. I like that I have to use them less early in game. I like that when I'm full juicing and doing end game content, I don't have to press them at all. They just have 100% uptime all the time automatically. That's great for like end game. So it feels better early and it feels better late. I just think that they're missing the other parts of it, right? Like it's not a finished plan. They've just done the flask part and then they haven't finished it, which is giving me the other tools to deal with the things I used to deal with flasks. Yeah. More defenses in other areas, more ways to deal with ailments, those sort of things have to come still. But I really love this direction for flasks being much weaker.
And do you like the reduced flask charges? Like, do you feel like that fixed all the pianoing?
It certainly did for me early in a league, except that I was pianoing anyway and just not having flask charges 2/3 of the time because I'm just in the habit of going. And I just kept doing it. But once I sort of got used to not doing that, I did start actively using them when I thought I needed them rather than just having them up 100% of the time. And then you move from that to having 100% uptime when you get to proper in-game juiced maps, sextants on it and everything. You've always got enough flasks for them, so it's back. Except you don't have to piano them anymore. There's just an orb that you can put on all of them, and they'll all trigger automatically all the time. So it's better in both scenarios for me. I have to actively think about it early. By the time I get to juice, I never have to piano at all.
I don't really feel like the flask charges thing did much. I think it just made it like more uncomfortable and clunky. Like we're still pianoing. Or at least I am. Most
It's
people,
just later.
Yeah, I mean, no, for me, like even day one, I was pianoing, so I don't feel like it did much. That
but
part.
do you think that most people playing the game is sustaining a very high uptime, if not close, or at 100% uptime of the flasks? Because I have an idea that that's not the case.
But it probably feels bad.
Yeah, I think that for us, that when we play a proper build, so to say, we end up having that fast charge situation because of the clear speed we achieve. But I would like to argue, based off a hunch, that I think that most people don't get to that point. And in their perspective, the fast charges are extremely detrimental to their play.
Yep. It feels really bad right now when your potions are out.
Okay, But does it feel really bad because you're used to having very strong flasks and now your flasks are weak and not up half the time? Does it feel bad because we don't have the other layers of defense that we should have gotten to make up for this loss? Like, would it not be a better use of your flasks to be, when you're slower, when you're earlier, actively thinking about using them when you want them, rather than just having them up all the time?
It's always very, very hard to retroactively do something to fix things. That's almost impossible. It's never going to feel good. You just have to like suffer through it until you get used to it. And I don't know, the charges thing doesn't really achieve much. I definitely I've never really liked Flasks being as powerful as they were and stuff like that. I would have much rather had a lot more power from Flask. And have that the default state of Flask was they don't gain charges while in use. But then when you do press them, they're extremely powerful.
Well, I mean, that's kind of... They just didn't want to take away that permanent uptime from people who wanted it, but they kind of give you that option with the Enkindling Orb because the increased effect does bring it up.
That's not very powerful, though.
Well, I mean, it's almost... not almost, but it's like 75% as powerful as it was before when... Not on all the flasks, right? But like most flasks, I would say, did loosely get nerfed by 50% power, right? Like Jade Flask, Granite Flask lost 50% of their base evasion and armor.
No, they lost way more than that.
Way more, because the base flask lost 50%, right? And then the rolls on the flask lost it, and then the charge up time lost it.
Yep.
Sure, but like I mean, the buff alone from the flask lost 50%. Sure, if you're min-maxing to get the most evasion, then you're rolling off reflexes, and off reflexes has also been nerfed. But let's say in a normal average game situation where you roll a suffix that removes an ailment, then you're not rolling the reflexes, and you're getting the 1500 instead of the 3000. And, well, I think I agree with Zizaran that flasks were way too powerful and way too much of a permanent buff. And what I think GGG wanted to accomplish is that less of the defensive power of a build comes overall from the flask and offensive power as well. And also they closed the gap between not having flasks up and having flasks up because the difference is not that big anymore. Now, uptime still feels weird, ailments still feel weird, a lot of things feel weird because the entire game was balanced around this insane power creep of us pianoing flasks all the time. So there's many more changes that need to come in order to accommodate the changes that we've seen to flasks so far for the overall system to feel good. But I like the direction of flasks being nerfed and being less powerful because that opens up design space to change the rest of the game around that.
Sure. Yeah, no, like I definitely do agree with Baylor that it feels very unfinished because I don't know, this is something maybe they didn't realize, but just like how much of a band-aid flasks were for builds. Like I'd say like mapping right now is the biggest problem. Like for bosses, we do have like fairly decent defenses and honestly just good movement is really, really good against bosses. But for mapping right now, whenever I was playing, for example, well, anything that isn't block or dodge, right? Just high regen build, endurance charges, stuff like that. With zero avoidance, that feels really rough for mapping right now. Like before, I could just have a Jade, a Granite, and a Quartz, and that would pretty much take care of mapping. But now with the reduced power and uptime of them, that feels really rough. And I feel very like heavily incentivized to just shoehorn in block or dodge on every build.
Yeah, no, I see that as well. But it's like whatever they did to Flask, it couldn't in this league be done without a lashback, without the follow-up solutions to other aspects to the game, right? And that's one of the biggest or main reasons to the lashback, because all of the Flask specifically, right? But before this, like I've always felt the same, like you guys were talking about, with how Flask always was too strong. And I've actually been preaching in the previous leagues about how they should just put to avoid the Flask piano, put a cooldown on the Flasks. It's such a simple solution. Make a cooldown that lasts longer than the duration, and then suddenly you have to use Flask reactively. But it should also come with the same backup solutions and fixes that the current Flask change rework is demanding. Right? So I mean, I don't really care how they do it, but whatever they do, and with the direction they've chosen, the the other things needs to come with it, because it's kind of weird at this point. Not just the getting adjustment period that we're in, but the other parts of it as well. Even if you're min-maxing with top pro reflexes on a Jade Flask, those defensive layers was the only defensive layer, because we don't have many other defensive layers to get in the game.
Yeah.
So what else is there?
I am very happy though about the Diamond Flask. That was always insane to me, just how much power we got from one shitty utility flask that you get early on. That was always very strange to me. And it felt really bad because of how powerful Diamond Flask was. You were like in no way incentivized to get more than like 65, 70% crit rate. Even if you had 50, build would feel really, really good with that. But then when you get to a boss, you feel like such a moron, because you don't want to like switch unless it's specifically a boss killer, you don't want to switch your entire build around it. And then you're basically like, okay, I'm just gonna like either like if the boss fight doesn't have a portal, then you log out, or you portal out, get fast starters, and come back in and hope to kill it within like 6
2
fast
charge
uses.
uses or whatever.
Yeah, like that was really, really bad. So definitely been enjoying crit builds a lot more, because now I'm actively building for like 90% and more crit.
Yeah,
And that's good.
I like that the well, I both dislike and like the changes with the support gems. It feels to me that they had the idea of making it more attractive for us to use different support gems, where in reality it doesn't matter what the support gems are doing. Most people will still use the best ones. But taking that aside, the crit gems changes was so beautiful. It's like you said, going for 90% or higher crit. For me right now, at least in softcore, like when we make a crit build, we don't settle with 90%. We're going for 100% crit, and we will use the crit gem, because how strong increased critical strike damage gem is right now is ridiculous. And so there's no reason not to have a 100% crit chance. So
Do
we
you
go
use
for
a
that.
diamond flask then at all?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's
it's
100% if you get flat from the crit gem and you get flat from other sources, then depending on the base crit of your skill, you get a shitload of crit from the 100%.
Sometimes the Bottle of Faith will replace it, depending on the build, depending on how much you need. I'm willing to wear both if I need to. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is with it, like even the changes to the crit flask, to the diamond flask feels really good because of how it works, right? And it's linear. You can calculate it without, going into PUB to check it as well. So it allows you to be in a position where you can actually drop some crit notes because of increased critical strikes to make the build generally better by trying to, like just said before, shoehorn in that GB and get some block notes from Sanctuary. Anything to save yourself, right? And you still have 100% crit. And at that point, I don't know. I really like the crit changes. That's one of the best things I've seen in 3.15, to be honest.
Yeah, fair. I do agree with the sentiment that's expressed, not only here, but also in the other podcast and in general in public, with the fact that everyone feels shoehorned, or not shoehorned, forced into block or dodge pretty much, which is something that I had already before this patch. And it's been an ongoing development over the last couple of years, I feel, with more accessibility to block and dodge coming in every patch through, cluster jewels and other stuff, that I feel the game has been somewhat balanced around the fact that most players would invest into these mechanics. And now with a lot of defenses stripped away from us, it feels almost impossible to build a feasible character without either block or dodge. But I think just like with the Flask situation, it's an ongoing process where they need to make many changes to accommodate that and likely slow down the game a little bit in order to allow for more reactive gameplay.
It's just very strange to me how they're so hard on defense when they don't seem to like particularly bounce around hardcore anyway. And it just further and further incentivizes players on softcore. Like, well, why am I going to build defense when I can just one-shot the next 3 screens?
Yeah. Necromantic Ages, by the way.
Yeah.
So they made one really huge mistake, in my opinion, when balancing those support gems, though, by the way. Their entire plan was, we're going to balance down all the damage support gems so that it's less of a negative effect to take like a utility support, like, spell cascade or like whatever utility support would go with you. Except that every utility support also got its damage scale down. which doesn't make any sense because now they're the same relative power that they were before. So the same gap exists between my good damage support gem and my utility support gem. So I'm always going to have to take the damage one because they hit the utility ones as well, which doesn't make any sense.
That plus the fact that overall the game has been nerfed and the power level that we have access to has been nerfed such that if you're not playing one of the top tier meta skills and one of the strongest options, then you will struggle hard to reach your minimum viability damage threshold, and so hard that you're gonna be forced into those high damage options over the utility options pretty much.
Some of those options will... So some of those options numbers wise would, like the utility one only brings 19% more damage and the damage one brings 39%. So you brought that. And then they're like, oh, the damage one's going to give me 24 now. And like you read that, you're like, oh, so I'd only go from 24% more to 19% more. Like it'd be a little less, but I could slot this utility in and use it. But no, then they bring that one from like, 19 to 11. And then you're like, but now I'm back in the same position. What are you doing? Everything's exactly as it was, just weaker. It doesn't make any sense.
Like the only thing I liked about it was the control instructions. I love that change. It felt so good. If you want to play a quick build, people have misunderstood control instructions. They were like, oh, 100% reduced critical strike chance, then I can't crit. No, that's not how it works.
I'm so happy I don't have to explain that anymore.
Yeah, I'm so happy with that as well. Like my throat's been getting sore. Why are you using control instructions? Like, how are you critting? Like, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Insert rant. All right, and then but it's like, I love that change because it makes things easy to understand, right? To some degree. Now control instruction is never used with crit strike or crit builds. And you want to use, you're more inclined to use the actual crit gems, which was never used, or well, maybe not never, but mostly never used in crit-based builds. It was so rare to see a crit build with those support gems. And now you have, if you're playing a crit build, you will be using those. And if you're playing an on-crit build, you will be using those structures for spell builds, obviously. But no, I see what you're saying, Baller, and I don't really like the rest of the changes, but like the only thing that I'm very happy with 3.50, like the main thing I'm genuinely happy with when it comes to the nerfs, that is, and the changes, it's actually the crit approach they've done with Diamond Flask and the crit gems and control instructions. That's literally the best thing they've done.
Yeah, let's quickly rotate back to the Flask topic and close that with the internal notes that Chris read out on the Baeclast regarding the plans for Flasks, where I think I'm quickly going to go over that. Enkindling orbs are supposed to get a big buff, so we get larger effects from enkindling orbs. Chris also said there will be a complete revisit of all mods of Flasks, and they will divide the mods, the suffix mods specifically, into proactive versus reactive mods, because they realize that you have the reactive Flasks, which are life, mana, hybrid recovery, and the proactive Flasks, which are utility. And they want to make separate versions of the suffixes for those two different groups. They also want to introduce mod tiers based on the item level, so that lower level Flasks cannot get the same power level of mods as higher level Flasks. And we'll get more crafting mods around Flasks. What do you guys think on that? Are those promising changes in your eyes that will remedy a lot of the perceived problems around Flasks in this patch? Or do you think that's not enough?
Yeah, I think that is a pretty good step in the right direction. I especially hope that they do make a very, very big distinction, more than just the mods, but like they seem very. It feels to me that they're very unclear about what they want us to do, because they seem like they're pushing us towards being like, we want you to be reactive. We want you to not be like fully immortal all the time. We want something to happen, and then you react to it to survive. But it feels a little bit like they're like, okay, are you aware how little time we have to react currently? Because very much of the times right now in Path of Exile, if you aren't proactive, you're in standard. So I hope they address that the most.
I can echo that with if you aren't proactive, you are in standard, because that felt so... There was such a big disconnect on the utility Flask between the suffix and the base effect of the utility Flask, because one half of the part one part of the flask wanted you to press it before you get hit, and the other one wanted you to press it after you get hit. And so no matter how you did it, you always felt like you're wasting half of the flask. So I very much hope that they're going to nail that change. Balor, please, you wanted to say something?
I mostly just want ailments off flasks entirely. I think moving them off and giving us a bunch of other different ways to deal with that instead, other options, is a way better thing. Ailment immunities on flasks doesn't even. I think the whole thing goes better if they're not on them anymore.
I'm not actually opposed to perma ailment immunity of flasks, as long as there are other strong options, so you're incentivized to not do it. Like, if there are loads of other mods, then you can go like, okay, early game, I'm going to deal with ailment immunity from Flask. But I'm giving up so much power by doing that I don't actually want to. I do, in fact, want to become ailment immune, because it's going to be like way better for my build if I have these other powerful things on Flask.
So you're advocating for making the utility suffixes stronger, so that you're heavily incentivized to go away from the ailment mitigation ones.
Yeah, it doesn't even need to be that much stronger. Like, I've already felt very incentivized to get things like percentage evasion or even like attack speed. And I mean, a lot of people aren't aware that you can craft the Katarina like flask on rails on normal flask. Like right now on my diamond flask, I have the 50% crit chance during flask effect, right? A lot of people aren't aware that you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
I would love that if it was an early option, but there were enough other tools that I'd be like constantly looking for. How can I pull shock off my flask? How can I pull freeze off my flasks? I want another affix there. And there were tools to do that. That would be great.
I think that there's a lot of different. I liked what you were going with there as well. But I think also at the same time, there's a lot of different aspects or perspectives, right? With different suggestions or ideas that would be really good, right? And we come back to the same thing that happened with Harvest change. GGG decides that, hey, we need to change Harvest. And a lot of people agreed. But if you ask 1,000 people, you would get 1,000 different opinions. And all those opinions would be really good solutions. And no matter which solution they chose, the majority would say that their solution is better and that what they really did was horrible. And I think we're going to have the same situation with the Flask, which brings me to mention what I think is really good, because no matter with all the hatred and negativity that we see going around, or having gone around at least, they said that I think it was a Reddit post, please correct me if I'm wrong, they mentioned that they want to look into solutions and then discuss that with the community. Straight up mentioned discussing it with the community. And I think that's really good that they're bringing the discussion to the community before it's implemented. And that's something, no other company is doing, not in that sense at least. So hopefully we'll be able to come to some sort of middle ground where they are happy with their philosophy and the community is happy with the outcome when it comes to the changes. Because something I've been concerned about leading into 3.16, which is why I've been advocating, or not advocating, but I've been saying that I would be perfectly fine with them treating 3.15 as a big ass sandbox leading into 3.16, because otherwise we're going to sit in a situation where 3.16 comes around and they'd be like, hey, we listened to you, so now we're going to change the Flask. Instead of one charge every 1 million monster, you're going to get 2 charges every 1 million monster you're going to kill. And everyone's going to be like, that's not what we asked for. And they'll be like, that's what you asked for. We heard you. And, have fun. But so it's going to be very fun to see how they're going to take whatever they have in store and bring that in a discussion format to the community. So I'm kind of hyped to see what's going to happen there.
I do always wonder, and I think no matter what you do, you have so many different types of players, right? You're never going to make everybody happy. Because also there's not really any competitive games right now. So even if you have players that don't necessarily want like a more complicated advanced game, they don't really have any other game right now. Which is bad, right? Because like the most important thing with gaming is make sure you're having fun. But I do wonder how many people would be enjoying it more if there wasn't as much like social media as today. Because what I noticed, I've seen 4 or 5 people post this on Reddit now that they'd like, this was in the Steam review thread, because people were like basically review bombing the game. And quite a few people were posting Like, yeah, I saw how negative it was, like how much everyone was hating it, so I also downvoted it. One guy said he had played for 1 hour and voted the game negatively on Steam. That's insane to me. Like,
An
that's
hour?
He played for an hour. Like, I don't mind if somebody plays for like, 10, 20 hours and like give it a try, and then they're like, you know what? This league isn't for me. But if you play for an hour and then review bomb the game and try to tell other people that it's shit, like honestly, you're a piece of shit. That's awful.
20 hours? I had a similar situation or mental response to one of my long-term YouTube subscribers commenting on one of the previous podcasts that he's a PoE veteran with like 15k hours or something like that, and has been playing since open beta and whatnot. And he's like, I played a trapper to level 83 and then decided this league is just not worth it and quit the game. And I'm like, okay, wait, 83 for a veteran? That's like 20 hours in. It's like, I don't think you're giving the game enough of a chance to figure it out.
20, like that. I mean, at least that is like trying it. Like 1 hour is very, very different than that.
Absolutely, yeah. That day and night difference. I agree.
It's a very...
Like
I feel like
1 hour
you-
straight up pissed me off. Like that was like, what the hell, dude?
Yeah.
Like, I
with
don't
your
like this thing either, but holy shit.
I feel like I've refunded games after an hour played, though. On
That's
Steam.
kind of different than a game that you've previously enjoyed for thousands of hours.
Right. So I'm thinking like a brand new player.
No. This was somebody that had played a lot before.
See, now that changes a lot. I was thinking like a brand new player, and I'm like, a brand new player can play for an hour and then be like, nah, this is shit. Because I've definitely done that in
No,
other
there's
games.
loads of games I haven't liked and played it. Like, no, this is clearly not for me.
I usually don't bother to leave reviews, but,
Yeah.
I just refund it and move on with my life. But yeah, if it's an
Because when you do
experienced
that, when you
player,
like played a lot before and do that, then it just feels very much like bandwagoning.
No.
yeah.
Fair. Well, there's one thing I still wanted to say. Oh yeah, please, Ghazzy, go ahead before I say my thing about Flasks.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, like, it's very important to remember the fact that this is a game, right? Like I said as well. Like, make sure you have fun, right? And what everyone thinks is fun is always going to be different from person to person, right? And as soon as people start listening to the negativity or the positivity, because, I mean, people can be praising the game and then they can be starting to play it and they'll be like, dude, this game fucking sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that side of the coin, and that type of spectrum as well, right? So I mean, you always have to make up your own, get your own experience, and make up your own mind about it. And people just, but that's just not in gaming; it's just everywhere. Everyone just wants to follow. Everyone wants to be sheeps, right? That's the problem.
No, I think that's super important. Other people and what other people enjoy doesn't matter.
What you said just now is like, it's a little bit of a sidetrack, but it reminds me of something that one of my mods expressed a couple of days about Path of Exile in my chat, and that is that Path of Exile does a very, very bad job at communicating to the player what the game will be like 20 hours in during the first 2-3 hours. It's just, it is very, very different, and it doesn't really communicate that at all, what the game is about. And so it really inevitably takes someone a long time to get into the game, because the first so and so many hours that they're playing the game, they're not really playing the game that they will be playing later.
I agree. That's why something I've always like kind of wished was that it would have some sort of like preset characters that you could play as a prequel for new players, that you could play like one map or something, and then because we like mostly our characters get like captured for a crime, right? So you could be like fleeing on like, a fairly powerful high level character, and then you get captured and boom, you are back on the beach.
I like that. That's like many superhero movies or stuff like that, where in order to create a struggle, the main character is stripped of a lot of their power and has to regain it as a sort of, trial throughout the movie as the arc ramps up. And I think that would be great.
Diablo 3 kind of does that.
Really?
And I kind of like it. So every league I play Diablo for the 3 days that it's entertaining for. But that's fine. But every time I forget what it's called, because I don't play it enough and I only give it 3 days. But there's a thing you do every season where you log on to a character that's like a level 70 or 80 version of that character, or like Paragon leveled or whatever the hell it is. It's a high leveled, already templated thing, and you get to run one rift through, and you get to keep doing it over and over again until you succeed on that one character, and then it's gone.
Yeah, literally that. Yeah, like paying it online or something. I don't know. There was some like weird subpar RPG I played that did the same thing, where you got to like try out all the abilities and stuff like that, and it was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But Chris doesn't want to tell the community which builds are good.
Well, they never put the best builds on the challenge rift thing anyway. It's always just like a functioning okay version. Like, I don't want to, you wouldn't want to put a brand new player on like a 4 million DPS Winter Orb with increased duration running around a map with a headhunter on. Like, that's going to not give you, right? You just want it to be like a decent-ish character that can clear the one map that it's allowed to play, just to like show you what it's going to be like. That would be really,
don't get me wrong. I think it's a great
thing.
idea. I think it's a great idea. It's like, I just remember Chris saying that he doesn't want to tell people what builds are good, because he feels like that's up to the community to find out, because that's half the game, or something along those lines, right?
Sure.
If I understood it correctly. I don't know. It's like something needs to be done. There's a lot of stuff when it comes to helping newer casual players understand things. Like I mentioned, the control instruction change was a great step in the right direction. Such a small, easy change that made it very clear for people, which they thought is how it worked before, but now it works the way most people thought it worked. I think that's great. So with the crit, like people see the crit and be like, "Oh, I can't crit if I use this." But now it's like, you use control instruction, you can't crit. It's not gonna work. I think that's like changes like that feels good, because it's when people read the modifier, they don't need to understand how additive and multiplicative modifiers work. They don't need to understand the equation of how the damage calculations calculate and all those things. They read the gem and they'll be like, okay, I can't use this if I want to crit. If I don't care about crit, then I can use this. And it makes sense, right? And there's a lot of those things that needs clarification, right? For someone who sent a message to me in Discord the other day, he's saying that he was asking me to ask Chris about the idea of implementing like some sort of like tutorial button when they get a skill or a new mechanic pops up. But the thing is that there already is tutorials with a lot of these things. Maybe more in depth is required of some sort if people want to learn how it works. But the problem with that is that if someone has to click on the tutorial button and start reading, 5 fucking pages of text, no one's going to do that. They can skip it and then they're going to play the game. Especially people who are veterans in the gaming world, they come into Path of Exile and be like, "Yeah, I played Diablo 3 days. That's all the end game I need." I mean, it's like it's okay. I can figure this shit out. And 3 hours later, they're dying in Act 6. I'm like, what went wrong?
So that teaching new players thing also extends to crafting pretty big, because like I again, this is something I get crucified for my opinion on. I actually think overall crafting's in a great spot right now. You can make a lot of really powerful things. The problem with crafting is that nobody knows how to do it, and the game never teaches you how to do it, and there's no new player in the world that's going to start crafting with things, because it doesn't make any sense, and there's no information in the game telling you what to do.
Yeah, crafting without knowing what you're doing feels like you're flushing currency down the drain.
And if you don't have a plan and know the rough odds of getting things and know the right way to do it, you're just like pulling a slot lever over and over again with almost no chance of getting something good, when that's not actually what crafting is. Generally, you can make the things that you intend to make still. I can still make really good items that I've targeted in exactly the way I want, because I know how to use all the systems, but it doesn't teach you any of it. Like, it's so hard.
Yeah. I agree about that, but should we keep that for the harvest discussion a little bit later on? I would still like to. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think?
So that's on the same topic of teaching new players, and I'm wondering, the reason why I went there then instead of later is because I've played another game which I wish I could remember the name of at the end of last league, and I can't remember it, but it had teaching me ways to do things in the intro stuff, and there was just a big skip button right at the beginning, which I didn't press. And so instead, I got little screen freezes when it came to things, and they taught me how to engage in their crafting system with the screen frozen and mobs around me. And they were like, take this reward that we gave you, apply that to this item. And I'm pretty sure, I only did it once, but I'm pretty sure it had a set outcome when I like did the equivalent of alking an item. I'm pretty sure it was always going to become the exact item that it gave me. But just the method of teaching me that really early and continuing that sort of thread would really, really help people actually be able to do things.
Well, there's a few things to that I wanted to bring up on that. And the biggest problem is that the baseline crafting newer casual players needs to understand and start learning is the easiest thing that is 100% deterministic, and that is bench crafting. Now, how many new players do you think goes in and understands that they have to go to the waypoint, to go to their hideout, and in there's a crafting bench? I know Grimmer and I talked about this a few days ago. Why don't they just add the benchcraft in every city and introduce people to the benchcraft? That way they can see that, oh, if I have a couple transmutation orbs, I can actually use them on getting plus lightning damage, or I can get some resistances, because fuck me, I'm dying to fire and cold damage in Act 6. I mean, it's such an easy... They don't even have to make a tutorial. They just have to put the benchcraft in the town.
In towns.
Yeah. Just put it in town, and that's it. And, introduce it. When you get into town, it'd be like, oh, this is the city, or whatever. Have a quest, like some of the introductional quests that you get to the different league mechanics, and have a quest that shows you the fucking bench. Go to this one and give people say a free 20 life craft, and that's it. Just put a life craft on an item. Then you have introduced people to the crafting bench, and they'll be like, oh, I got to modify my item, and they can use that, and suddenly they've been introduced to it, right? There's nowhere near that. But another problem with crafting when it comes to the more advanced crafting is that we were more talking about here, and that is the aspect of the crafting right now is, in my opinion, not at all in a good state. The problem is that the lower end crafting is heavily emphasized on RNG, whereas a little bit more investment, then you start getting the deterministic outcomes. They're still RNG based because that's how crafting works, right? But we're talking about fossils, talking about essence crafting, and all those things. With just a little bit of investment. And the more currency you pile onto it, the more deterministic it becomes. And later on, we're talking about metacrafts, right? And even further down the road, because the harvest changes is only catering to the 1% players. There's no reason to mention harvest crafts to the 2 casual players, in my opinion, because they're not going to get an augment craft. We 1% players that play a shipment. We don't get augment crafts. We don't get the augment craft. We pay 10, 15, 20x for the crafts on TFT because the casuals can't afford them.
Yeah,
that's what
they definitely should make it the other way around. That like the more deterministic, the weaker it is.
Yeah.
And make it like, fairly deterministic up to a certain power so that it's like more doable, especially for new players to craft things. And like even the amount of new players that don't know that you can like
press highlight button for
white item is staggering.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Actually, I agree with that. The super, super, super low level of crafting is nothing but RNG.
Yep.
Like you have to know what you're doing and have just a little bit of currency to start getting like the semi-deterministic stuff. You can't just elk a pair of boots for a new pair of boots.
It's
pretty
really
much never
gated
works.
on the wrong way right now because things like you have so much power and stuff both with knowledge and also things with prefixes cannot be changed, suffixes cannot be changed, and veiled chaos orbs and shit like that. It's insane.
Yeah. I see a comment on the chat that I would like to respond to, and that is the idea of deterministic crafting. I think that a lot of people that are not, most people don't understand how high-end crafting works. And I just want to say that with enough currency, you can guarantee 100% deterministic crafting outcomes. This includes ashling, this includes harvest crafting, this includes meta crafting. You can 100% guarantee outcomes, which is 100% deterministic. We're not talking about lower variances. We're talking about 100% deterministic crafting.
Well, to be clear there, that doesn't work for every outcome that is desirable, but there are outcomes in the game that you can deterministically guarantee.
Most things
it's more
for higher
like
end
there
game
are
builds right now can be
some-
deterministic crafts.
Yeah, it's more like
Most.
there are some that you can't, but generally you can.
Yeah. And I think that's
There's-
stupid. Like Sis said, it's better if they had it the other way around. Those stupid crafts, like super high end, should be like super RNG based and be like, oh, I hit this lucky. Like Chris wants us to be like, look what I made. And be like, look at it. I made this. Loathbane's back. You know? That kind of approach, right? But we don't see that. Instead, we see the casual players or the new players that be like, I smacked an alk on this. I got tier 9 life. That's my end game chest right there. I mean, it's like...
It's really easy for me to be like, oh, I'm going to have, elevated onslaught, elevated tailwind, elusive, movement speed, cannot be chilled, cannot be frozen, life boots. I can make them every league. I can make 10 pairs of them in a row, the exact same pair of boots.
Yeah.
But if I'm just a brand new player and I would like, 40 life and 25% movement speed and I need to fix my cold res, I cannot make those boots without having a decent amount of currency. Like, I can't do that. If I've got 2 chaos to my name, the only way to get that is to buy it, or in this instance, I could probably ROG craft it. But, in general, you can't do that exact little, I just need 25 movement speed, 40 life, and a bit of cold res. Like a garbage piece.
I really do like ROG, though. He seems like a pretty good compromise between what TGG wants and deterministic crafting. Because there's obviously clearly loads of layers of RNG and stuff, and you are rewarded for knowledge. But I mean, even like most new players I've talked to and stuff seem to really enjoy ROG, especially now that they obviously in the start it was kind of unclear what was happening with like it was very weird wording on things like the best and stuff and worst. Like a lot of new players don't understand that. But now that that's cleared up and they're highlighting things, which is also what they should have done with synthesis to begin with. Like now, like a lot of new players seem to be really enjoying it, and it's pretty straightforward how it works.
Yeah, I think the changes that they made to ROG are spot on. The fact that it highlights the mods and that it has advanced mod descriptions on by default. You don't have to press your highlight button, but it shows you specifically what tiers, what affixes you have, because that also kind of gets new people asking for that. Because I've always had a huge problem with advanced mod descriptions not being on per default and the items not telling people that you can press a button and it will give you more information about how this works. Which is, I mean, the item system is super obscure in Path of Exile. I don't think we need to discuss that.
To be fair, though, it kind of has to be, because when you're super new, that really is like pointless.
Yeah, you don't want to be overwhelmed, but like, I think it should not be opt-in the user interface because it's already opt-in with the highlight button. So it could just say so on the item.
I wish there was a more hands-on tutorial that you could do one time per account that literally would walk you through it more with like pop-ups stopping the game, like Baylor pointed out earlier, and like showing how to do things. So that like maybe in like, I don't know, maybe in your first map or something, say, we're now going to walk you through a little bit more advanced crafting. So, and then it'll be like a checkbox that says like enable advanced tooltip. You click that, and then it starts showing you like, this is mods, this is tiers, this is how it works. Because I don't know, I think a tutorial like that is more interesting for people to follow than like the current one that it's like you have to like start clicking on things and reading page by page. Not really sure how relevant it is, and you're like, it's very skippable.
And when it's something important like that, the whole like screen freeze, big arrow, point me to a thing, makes it feel like, oh, this is something I really need to learn. Whereas when it's just like a pop-up in the corner, even when it's a brand new game I've never played before, do you stop and read little pop-ups in the corner?
No, you're in the middle of killing monsters. I'm not reading a pop-up right now. I have ADHD. I want to be entertained by like funny, flashy things happening on the screen. I'd maybe think, hey, maybe I'll open it later, but... No,
whereas
but
if it's like a screen freeze, you're engaged in that. You're like, ooh, why is it stopping me? Ooh, how important is this? Right? And most importantly, we know they can screen freeze at any time they want now. Because we've seen it, and I loved it, and I want it for more things, but that's a different topic.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I care about. I want to know how many new players dropped a pair of gloves and went, dang, yo. It's like that's the only thing I care about.
dang,
I have a number on that.
Since we're already in the middle of deterministic crafting, I want to quickly, I guess I agree with you because you've echoed the same sentiment, but I just want to say very clearly that I think the best thing that Harvest did, and the thing that people miss most about Harvest, is not the insane power level of the crafts, but is giving people a clearly outlined path to their next upgrade in terms of item progression. If that's the big problem, I want to read out a comment that I copy-pasted from SF Hobbit's chat the other day, where someone said, I think GGG freaks the fuck out seeing like 24 players with multiple mirror tier items, but for most people it's just like 1 or 2 really good items that take them weeks to craft, and it's a really fun goal to work toward. Sorry. And then also in response to Chris saying on your podcast, people want a shortcut to powerful items. People actually disagreed with that and said, no, we want a clear path. And in between to get the character progressed into the early end game where it feels like the content that you farm matters. Because that's also a big problem right now where we only feel that spending time in maps is meaningful once we reach the end of the Atlas progression with all the return power gated behind the Atlas passives and stuff. And so, yeah, I'm really, when it comes to Harvest, I'm all for returning it to some of its former glory, as long as it's locked out of the top end of the item creation process, but gives people a sort of bottom line or a minimum level to accomplish in terms of item power.
I do doubt that we're going to see more love for things like Harvest, but I mean, I think there's a happy medium there. Like, also, Harvest didn't really have like really good retention, right? It was pretty bad. So I think there was some truth in what Chris Wilson was saying on Baeclast, which was when players do have so he worded it kind of badly. He said when players have perfect items, they quit the game, and a lot of people are like, but we aren't getting perfect items. And it's more in line with what you said, where as long as players have like whatever is comfortable for them, and this changes like depending on like how much you play the game and how experienced you are, but people want to have their next upgrade in sight. Like if a new player suddenly has like, okay, well, first off, I have no idea how to get my next upgrade, and it would be like 50 hours to get there, then they're gonna quit, right? Or 10 hours or something like that, right? They want to feel like their next upgrade is within grasp. And same for like no lifers, right? If they're like, if Ghazzy's like, okay, my character's pretty much perfect, it's 100 hours to get one upgrade right now, then he's probably going to be like, you know what, I'll either make a new character or quit.
What are some of the other things that you guys think people or GGG could do to Harvest to make it more common and more accessible for people without creating the power in the power problem in the item system?
Delete it and find other options. People are never going to be happy with Harvest.
That's no matter true. What they do. It's burned ground. I agree. I also said
I would be 100% happy with just deleting it and introducing something else. But something on Ziz's podcast that they mentioned and talked about a little bit that I wish was like harked further was the idea that no one ever finds the crafts anyway. And so that gets even worse when you think
items,
about,
you mean, right?
The no one even finds like an augment something.
Oh, right.
Like that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right? Like I haven't seen an augment since the second Harvest League, I guess.
Yep.
When it was full power. I saw tons then. Haven't seen one since. I play tons. I play more than I'm definitely in like the 0.1% of hours played every league, right? Like we all are.
Yep.
I haven't seen
Has any of us found one?
At all. What was that?
Has any of us found one?
I think I had to remove
deliberately
that.
Pushed harvest farming, and I found one Exalted Slam, non-influenced today. Not today, but this league. And I found one last league, and I believe it was an Augment Lightning.
Wow.
And, dude, wow. I was screaming at the top of my lungs. It was the craziest shit ever. It was insane. Holy fuck. It was crazy. No. I've never been so excited. I would drop in a mirror. I'd never seen a mirror drop, despite my amount of hours, which is also insane. But that Augment Lightning made my entire league.
And I
I'm not
believe
kidding.
I may have remembered this wrong, but I think Ziz was pushing in the direction of like, well, that like we don't really need to buff the power, but we need to actually see the crafts for people to be able to use them. And I really feel like if we're not going to just, you know, scorched field, abandon harvest, get other options, because that probably is the best solution. But if we're not going to do that, people need to see them. Like I should be seeing several a week in the amount of times that I play.
At least one.
And if I want a chance for an average player to be able to find them even one a week, with my amount of hours, I should be finding 3 or 4 a week. If I want them to be able to find one, which seems reasonable. And then on top of that, with its new limitations and much lower power level, why is there any reason that I can only hold 10 of them? Like, why is anyone forced to... The only way to essentially to use it properly is that you have 19 bases sitting in your stash, knowing what they are before you even get there, and already have them prepared so that you can use the reforges. The reforges are super strong. You make all sorts of stuff with reforges. I make tons of money in a trade league with reforges because I already have the bases there. But it feels like you should be able to save them as you find them for a few days and then have a self-made crafting session yourself. Be like, great, I've encountered harvest for like the 6th time. I reckon I've probably got enough of these to start rolling some items on, you know, I want this ring and a new pair of boots, and I'm going to sit here and use all the harvest that I've collected. It's sort of the same deal as Alvas being forced to run them when they were full, and they obviously were like, oh, that interrupts your gameplay, that annoys people, we're going to make it so it's itemized. That's great, but that didn't carry over to harvest. It's just suddenly capped and forced to use immediately or lose, and that feels weird.
Yeah. So like the more and more we talk about it, the more I'm like starting to lean towards like burn harvest to the ground, because because like people are always gonna have that memory of harvest of being able to like do what it could, and GGD are never gonna go back to that. So then it'll always feel like kind of bad. And something that this has always been bad about harvest, like you always, like you pointed out, you just need to have loads of crafting projects, and the average player is never going to do that. Like I had a crafting tab and a spreadsheet going like, okay, if I find this craft, I need to remember to use it on this boot. If I find that craft, I need to use it on this ring. And the second craft of that, I need to use it on that amulet, right? Normal players aren't going to do that. That's a terrible way to play. That's unenjoyable. And I think something like Rug is just so much better because there's no planning around it. You're just like, oh, you see an item, you craft on it, and like you need a boot, you buy a boot from Rug and start crafting, right? Like,
and I'm not forced to do it immediately.
Yeah, you
which
don't
is my
need to
biggest
have
problem.
like 30, 40 crafting projects.
Yeah.
But I mean, you have access to 15 crafts with harvest, if you of course encounter that boss that doesn't exist.
I haven't seen that boss, by the way, either.
That's a good question. Has any of you ever dropped any of the fragments?
Nope.
No. I bought
Not with the amount of hours you guys play. Never.
What fragments?
Here for buff
Exactly.
fragment.
I've never seen them either. And I play with a 3-man group, and no one in my group has found it either. And all 3 of us plays an obnoxious amount of hours, just like all 4 of us.
Yeah.
Never seen
And
them.
I was farming with 4 of those like blossom things as well.
Yeah.
I found 3 tier 4 beasts. None of them dropped the fragment because I wasn't in Proxima.
Nice.
Yeah,
But I mean,
wow.
like what I feel a lot, and I think that a lot of people feel like GGG, Chris Wilson, whatever they want to call it. I think a lot of people have said that they feel it's they're very disconnected from the player base. And then we see in the interview, Chris Wilson is saying he feels like Harvest is too gifty.
I see that too, though. I see
The
that.
problem with yeah, because the problem is that depending on which perspective you have, that's absolutely correct. It really is. But it's just the underlying factor of all the other aspects to it that makes everyone's like go twist in their chair and be like, what the fuck did I just hear?
If you're willing to use TFT, Harvest is still very clearly way too strong.
Yep.
Like way too strong. And if you're an average 2-hour a night gamer, you'll probably not craft anything with Harvest the entire league.
Yep.
Like my
It all
problem,
would be garbage for you.
my problem with that is that it seems to me like GGG are perfectly fine with letting TFT be the sole the main way for people to trade harvest, and all of us will. Because the thing is, like, don't get me wrong, I both hate and love TFT. I think that it's terrible that a third-party group is running control on the whole thing, and there's been a lot of problems with that, obviously. But we also have to remember that all of us that are actually bothering to trade these things, what the hell would we do without them? They are a godsend blessing. Whatever they do with it, it's like, holy shit. I wouldn't sit in a trade chat.
We always did.
I wouldn't sit in a trade chat and give him an item worth 500 exalted. So just put crafts in to get an augment craft on it. Hell no.
But like trading like TFT always existed.
Oh,
It
yeah,
always
yeah.
existed. It was in the form of forums. And now, at least with TFT, if you're going to do it, it's quicker and much safer.
No, okay, no, I strongly disagree. That is nothing like TFT. When the forum trading happened, you would sometimes wait a week and a half for them to reply about the ring you wanted to buy with 40 life and 1 resist on it. That's very different.
Yes, it's a lot quicker. It is much quicker and safer now, because like the amount of times I've handed over 100x to a stranger without caring about it in an item must be in the hundreds. I've never been scammed. Like,
Yeah.
The amount of times you get scammed on TFT is very minimal. Like, it
from my
almost never happened.
From my experience from Softcore trade, at least, it feels a lot to me that we streamers have so much easier to trade when it comes to these crafts. People are flocking around, trading to streamers. I can ask my chat, and I can buy crafts from them instead. It's so much easier for us to trade crafts than it is for anyone else in the game, and that's really unfair in that sense. It's also, especially when it comes to mirror service crafts, when it comes to that end, even if the person has a lot of upvotes, whatever they have, like with TFT, like they have this vouching system, right, which I think is the best they could have done from my perspective. I don't give my items sales. I refuse to. I demand a collateral, and some of the crafts I've done, I demand a mirror in collateral. They have to give me a mirror, or at least the equivalent of that, for me to just give them the item to put the craft on it, and I've done that. But if I wasn't a streamer, there's no way in hell that someone would give that for a half-finished craft base with just the suffixes sorted. No one would do that. But because I'm a streamer, I'm able to do it. I don't know.
I've handed
don't get me wrong. Like, I love
items.
TFT. I think that what they do is amazing. I think that without them, I'd be crying in a corner about trading harvest crafts. But I think that they're doing a great job. What I don't like is that GGG thinks that it's okay when it's clearly something the community want, and they should do something themselves to fix it, or burn it to the ground. Because like, I have two different perspectives when it comes to harvest. I have a content creator me and I have gamer me. Gamer me says fuck it all, remove it from the game, and content creator me feels like it's like, what else is the casual player going to use for crafting? I mean, even if it's not good, it's still better than nothing.
But none of us are saying remove it without a replacement. There needs to be.
No, of course not. Of course not.
Yeah, we want something. I would love something that made it not nearly as easy for me to make the items I make, because they're disgusting. The items Ghazzy makes shouldn't be that easy or possible. It should be a rarity that you get a helmet like I know you've probably got this league and have every other league. That should be a rarity. You shouldn't be able to just make that, but you can. If you want one of those helmets, you can just make it. That should be very hard. That should be such a huge deal that you actually successfully did it, that you've been trying to do it for 3 or 4 leagues with your amount of playtime, and you're like, I finally did it. I've got this disgusting, perfect from top to bottom item. It should be massive news. It should be a lot easier to make okay-ish average items. Here's my 2 mod that are elevated because I can get to there, and then the rest of the item was sort of random, and I managed to hit life in 1 tier 4 res, and now I'm real happy about it. That should be a lot easier to do. Whereas
that is pretty much what GGG wants, right? Because they feel trading is too powerful, and they're right compared to like the vision of what they want things to be. Then yeah, sure, trading is too powerful compared to that.
Balor already answered the question, but just in general, harvest or not, where do you stand personally on the place of deterministic crafting? Like, what is the place that you see for deterministic crafting in the game? Basically, what Balor said is it's okay for mid-tier, and it shouldn't really exist at the top end. if I summarize that correctly.
Yeah, pretty much. I'd like to deterministically make decently okay items, even okay for me. Like even my level of okay, which for a lot of people would be like, that's a disgusting item. I should be able to still make that with enough work, but the disgusting perfect stuff shouldn't exist.
So I don't care anymore. I am pretty low maintenance when it comes to game. Path of Exile isn't my favorite game, and my favorite game will probably never exist. So the most important thing for me is just the most amount of people having fun. I had fun in Harvest. I have fun this league. I'm fairly easy maintenance as a player. So it seems to me that more people want deterministic crafting than not. So I would be more in favor of more towards deterministic crafting. Because I'm pretty easy.
But should it grant access to the most powerful items in the game or not?
Sorry?
I was just following up on this. Do you think
I would definitely
deterministic...
prefer the most powerful items in the game being more gated behind RNG and more accessible items. But again, I don't care that much.
You don't care that much about the game catering to you, but you care more about it.
I have so much more fun. This is a very, very streamer take. I am fucking miserable when the community is miserable. It is awful.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that. I'll give up every view I have if it just makes everybody do it their way. If it makes everybody happy, and it'll make my entire life better.
I will agree. The negativity has been rampant and dragging down everyone, not just content creators. But I feel like people are having less fun in the game currently than they would be having without all the looming negativity.
Yep.
Definitely agree.
So, do you still want to say something on that question, Ghazzy, about the deterministic crafting?
No, it was basically just I missed when I had to spend 2,000-3,000 exaltas to finish an item. I actually missed that because when I finished it, it was like the pain is over. I have achieved this, and that was with eternal orbs, and it was disgusting, and it took such a long time to do, and it was insanely rewarding when you finally did it. And then Harvest came around. Like, I could do that 70x now. But I mean, it's like, I don't know. I missed that because it was gated so much behind RNG. But it's like BalorMage was saying. I would really love there to see more deterministic on the lower end because it's just not fair. And I think that the majority community will be good. Will be happy with it. And it kind of goes very hand in hand with what Zizaran is saying. It's like streaming every day during this league. It has been enjoyable to play, less fun to talk about, if that makes any sense. Because it's like most of the content we do is like we play, we have fun, and then as soon as we look at chat or as soon as we make a video, it's like, okay, well, this is my take on it, and okay, let's talk about this. He said that, she said this, they did this. I'm like, okay, but can I just play the game and have fun?
Please make a
and then
statement on this opinion.
Yeah, and then I want to play the game and have fun, and then the first thing I get is like, how can you have fun? What? Can I please have fun? Just try to focus on the things you enjoy. I mean, I understand that people are upset, but it feels like it's like too much focus on it sometimes.
Yeah. And the bad part about that is the people that are the most upset right now are the people that started playing in like the last 2, maybe last 3 years. Generally, the people that have been playing for a very long time have been through a lot of like intense and large changes. So they're more used to it and maybe trust you to do more, or they wouldn't be playing the game for like 8 years, right? So
Yeah, definitely.
We know that when they nerf and take away a bunch of stuff from us, we know stuff is coming back. They're not particularly great at doing the entire sweeping change that they want to do in one move. They tend to have a habit of being like, okay, it's half done. Here's all the nerf parts. We did that first. Enjoy. And then it's just a little bit shit for a little bit. And then they're like, oh, and here's the other half that counters that.
Yep.
And now here's some different ways that you can deal with whatever problem we've introduced. And you're like, oh, this is so much better. It's great.
Also, we have played all of many years now. We also have to keep in mind that GGG has always been encouraging the idea of trying new things. And I think that's really good. And sometimes it can be a bit too much, and sometimes it can be not enough, right? But the fact that they are trying new things, like Synthesis League was amazing, and according to some people, it was terrible according to others, right? And there's a lot of things that goes through with the way they do things. But the fact that they are willing to try things out, like give people a big best crafting ever. Here we have Harvest, right? Maybe not the smartest choice, but they tried it out, right? Which now ended up to where we are now. But I think that's I think it's pretty cool to see them test things despite the feedback and the negativity that's going on in the current state of the league. But I mean, it's like Sis said, I mean, we've got to give them some faith as well, because they are still the better company than most others out there.
Harvest was fine as an experiment. For one league, Harvest was great. Just like we talked about it earlier with the huge bypass of progression by getting item level 80 plus bases from Gwenin and from Rog. That's okay. That's fine for a league, but people shouldn't get used to that being the standard. It's fun if a league hands out huge power chunks as a reward while it's the main thing in the game. But as soon as it goes core, if it goes core, it shouldn't provide this thing that outclasses everything else in the game. And Harvest was fine for as long as it was a league, especially because it was also coupled to a lot of annoying micromanagement and a lot of like organizational overhead. But bringing it back in full power, I think everyone agrees on this podcast, was probably the worst thing they could have done, because it 100%. Gave the people the idea that that's here to stay when they just didn't have time to adjust it down to where they saw it appropriate and power.
You remember how people celebrated it on Reddit when they announced it? People were like, "It's back," and I'm like, "Yes." Next league, it's like,
and it's gone.
It's the one time in my entire content creation career I've ever received death threats. Was when Harvest came back, and I put out a video saying, "Don't bring Harvest back. This is a horrible mistake. You're going to ruin everything. Do not bring Harvest back." That was the one time I've ever received death threats. It was over that video, 5 of them. It's crazy how people got very, very energetic about that. But also, real quick, just because it's like a little nitpick thing of mine, you were like, some people didn't like Synthesis, and I'm pretty sure it's people who quit in the first month hated Synthesis because it was kind of trash at the beginning, and anyone who stayed until Synthesis ended loves it. Best league I've ever played.
I don't even know how Synthesis was in the first month, because after my first character died and I got my second one to maps and Kvass was gone and Zana replaced him, I couldn't even enter the memory nexus because you didn't get the waypoint for the memory nexus unless you talked to Cassius, or what was his name, Kvass. And so I on my second character I couldn't memory nexus until they fixed that 4 or 5 weeks into the league. It was terrible.
I would say it wasn't just the bugs though. It's just a lot of people don't like complex mechanics. You have a decent size of the player base that just wants to get home from work, sit down and slap some monsters around, right? They don't want to have to fucking sit there with spreadsheets trying to figure out what kind of items they can create.
Yeah, with 5 screens, one on the wiki, one on the POEDB, and everywhere. No, I agree about that. And Harvest did a very not Harvest. Synthesis did a very bad job at communicating what the synthesizer mechanic did in game. It was terrible, but I think they learned a lot from it. And I mean, through Harvest and now with ROG, we've seen constant improvements to getting people into the mechanic. I think if anyone learned from their past mistakes there, it's hopefully GGG.
I think it's important to remember the fact that the very foundation of most games, if not every game, is the casual player base. Without that, the game can't run, right?
True.
Fair enough. Let's close that Harvest topic for now. And there was 1 or 2 things that I still wanted to say about Flasks and Ailments. I don't know whether you guys felt we were done on that. I just wanted to quickly note on the introduction of tiered mods for the Flask affixes when they depend on item level, that I think that's good in one way, because just like Ziz said, with Ailments being a band-aid for early on Flasks and later you replace it with suffix mods, I really enjoy that there's more to the Flask system than just leveling, then setting it up for maps, and then never touching your Flask setup again. I like the idea of being involved in setting up your Flasks and making changes to the ongoing, in your ongoing run to the Flask systems later on. And if done right, adding tiered mods could do that, at least for SSF and trade. Obviously, after a weekend or so, you can just buy the high eye level Flasks, and that will be the same as with any other item, and just devalue the lower bases. But if done right, I think it can be a change that encourages people to stay more engaged with the Flask progression over a longer time. Because for me in the past, I didn't really change anything about my Flasks after I got into maps. Yeah, I changed out the suffixes once I got Ailment immunity, if I got that in the build, and maybe switched one out for a unique Flask when I got it. But other than that, my Flasks were basically done by the time I enter maps.
Mm-hmm.
You agree with that, or
yeah?
Did you like? Okay.
Yeah.
Couldn't really tell from the it sounded like that's a peculiar take. And
this is also my first time in solo self-found, so it's the first time I haven't had perfect Flasks in my very first map. Because I just always do, like a league start, by the time I get there, I've got 15, 20 chaos sitting there. I've got, 80 alterations or something just from leveling. And so I just buy whatever the hell I need and just have perfect Flasks immediately. So it's very... Usually I just buy alts and roll them and beast them. But it'll be... Is this solo self-found's the first time I haven't had perfect Flasks to begin with? And then also having to upgrade them again would probably feel really, really good. Because, I don't know. It's weird playing solo self-found for the first time because, I was just doing tier 10 Guardians on a 4-link. Just before the stream, I finally 5-linked my other spare chest and then was really excited about it. I was like, yes, a 5-link, finally. And then I'm like, I always enter maps with a 6-link just immediately. I'll get a corrupted 6-link or something and just be like, here I go, full power. And the idea of having to upgrade over time, everything seems a lot more appealing and fun. So I assume that will also carry over to Flasks, and that'll even happen in my trade league start, right? Because those item level Flasks aren't going to exist. I'll be able to get okay affixes and go into maps, but I'm still going to have to upgrade them again as I go up. So that should be good.
Are you worried about alterations at all? Because I've seen that something being expressed by people.
Yeah.
Yes?
I made another div card for alts.
When?
That's the reason.
Did you have another one open? Because Chris said that they stopped selling div cards, right?
Another one we just added the a Sea of Blue.
Oh, okay. I don't think I've seen that one.
Also, I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's still quite a few that have already been bought that aren't in the game yet. As in,
I would assume
selling them. They've stopped selling them, but there's still a list of more that are going to enter the game.
Yep.
Because
I have one more coming.
I'm not really worried about alts though, because even in solo self-found, I turn off 95% of the loot on day 2. If I need more alts, I'll turn slightly more loot back on. That's what that'll be. I'll be like, oh, I'm running low on alts. Let's turn on more jewelry so I can vendor more stuff. I'm fine with that.
And allow me to do another quick jump. Originally, in the plan for the outline of the podcast, I was planning to drive home another point as we transition from Flasks into ailment discussion, which we kind of skipped by going directly to harvest, but that's fine. Then we know we got that covered, and that's a really important topic that people want to have talked about. But what did I want to say? Path of Exile is all about, that's a big topic that came up in the podcast we did with Itsioji and Project PT, is that Path of Exile currently is a lot about reaching a win state, and at that point the game is sort of trivial, right? You get your build set up to the point where you can one-shot monster packs screen for screen without the monsters being able to fight back, and as soon as you reach that point, the game gets a lot easier as opposed to having to, micro reposition and play around the enemies. And in the same way, elemental ailments and flasks, there were closely tied together until this patch, and they will probably remain to be for a while. You really were heavily incentivized into being able to ignore elemental ailments one way or another. And the way that Grinding Gear Games or Chris Wilson talk about the game, I think they want to move away a little bit from this win state and have more meaningful interactions with players and monsters. And I think it would be good if going forward, we wouldn't only be able to gear around ailment mitigation more in different ways, have different access to ailment immunity, but maybe if ailment immunity was something that would be more or less phased out over time. I think it was a big mistake, because back in the day when I started playing the game, Flasks would only remove ailments. They wouldn't grant a period of immunity. And over time, it has developed into the situation where you need to be immune to ailments. But I'd much rather prefer a game where occasionally I am affected by ailments, but it's not the death of my character, or affected by a curse, but I have to make a slow adaptation in terms of how I play the game, a small adaptation, not a slow one, instead of pressing a button or speccing a passive or equipping a piece of gear and completely ignoring that mechanic. What do you guys think about that?
So I think a very, very big part of the problem there is that there's a lot of ailments that aren't like, they're not like just like dangerous for your character. It's either you're immune to it or it's death. Like,
Exactly.
for example, Frozen, right? Like if Frozen was just that it started like, if Frozen didn't exist really, and that it was more something like chilled makes a lot more sense. Like being chilled and then like building up your chill reduction, that's something to invest into. Like, oh yeah, I want to be chilled less, so I'll get like 20, 40, or 60% less effect. Maybe you can't get a full immunity like 100, but that's very, very different than like, oh, I'm frozen. I'm standing here looking at my character, taking it, oh great, I'm dead, sweet. Like that just, it never feels good, right? You just feel like if you get frozen and die, you just feel like you fucked up and that you should have avoided this altogether. Whereas being chilled and dying from chilled, that's actually kind of like a good death, right? So I think that's like a very, very, very big thing. I also think it's almost impossible to go back on things. Like it always feels terrible. Even if it is important to do it, it always feels terrible for quite a large amount of time. I remember when they did like they buffed like the boss health during the campaign so that you weren't like one-shotting piety and stuff anymore. And I remember I was doing speedrun practice, and this was a season I'd practiced quite a lot. And I had like just practiced a shit ton right before. So I was like one of the fastest players, as long as I didn't die. And I was practicing pretty much alongside Tai Killer. And once I got to piety in Act 4, I gave up. And I was like, no, I'm too tilted. Like, I have literally no damage. Like, there's no way this is right. Like, I fucked something up. I'm either under-leveled or I messed something up. And then when I quit, people were like, wait, you're right behind Tai. Why'd you give up? And I was like, I'm what now? And I turned out I was like a minute, 10 seconds behind Tai. But it just felt so bad because you're always comparing it to the league that had just been. Like, that's like the really, really bad thing, and why removing something is so extremely punishing. Because you're never thinking like, is this a better experience? You're thinking, is this worse than before?
So Petrified is a really good example of how to freeze a character the correct way. Because we have Petrified in the game, but only in very few areas. So when you get for instance, the boss that petrifies you, right? You have to look at it and it has to look at you, and it slows you down slowly, and you've got a ton of time to react and do something about that. Get to the other side of him, look away, kill him before it freezes you. There's this whole period of time to react
sure.
before you're eventually frozen.
Sure, but there is other petrifies too. Like there's Betrayal Petrify and Logbook Petrify, which is just on hit.
Yeah, so those are terrible.
Right,
but
okay, cool.
Specifically the one from that boss is a really good freeze
great.
Your character mechanic that's done the correct way.
I
wouldn't
be
be
worried
against
there for a second.
Yeah, I was like horrified. I was like, what do you mean?
I specifically mean the mob type that is that boss that does that
Sure.
like that way of freezing a character.
Yeah, like
feels
the
like a really
thing.
good one. Yeah. Because like
It's
there's
like
so many
whenever you're
things
smoking,
that
I
line
want
up,
some.
you have a bunch of time to react, and that feels fine. If you got like frozen in that way, like there was a a chill that was just going to build up, and it was a visually obvious one, and you knew that if you stayed in that little area for more than like 2 seconds or 3 seconds or whatever the hell the time ended up being, that you would just get frozen. That wouldn't feel that unfair. You'd be like, oh, this is a freeze area. I got to get the hell out of there before my character goes into hypothermic shock. Right? That would be okay.
I like the idea of this approach. The problem with it is the fundamental core design of the game prevents that from being a good solution. And what I mean when I say that is that the general consensus, at least in Softcore, is this. The less you can see on the screen when you're playing, the better your build is. The more you can see, the worse your build most likely is. And that is a very common problem in Softcore right now. The more flash explosions everywhere, with the MTX stacked all over the places and mega explosions happening everywhere, even an extremely well telegraphed ability is going to be impossible to dodge because you can't see it. That's the biggest problem I have with it. I've died numerous times on builds that are actually designed to be tanky from well telegraphed betrayal incursions that pops out in the middle of a bunch of explosions. I'm dodging a bear, like frost bear or something, moving to the side, and where I'm moving is the monster pack. They explode. Suddenly I'm dead. I look at the clip. Yeah, there was a corner of my screen. There was a betrayal guide, a guy charging up an attack, which was very visible at the corner of the screen, but I couldn't see it because of all the flashy explosions that are happening everywhere on the screen. It's impossible for me to notice. It's a well-telegraphed ability if you take away all the explosions. You can dodge those very easily. But because I couldn't see it, or even worse, the little glass spikes on the ground that one of the materials are putting down, the ice shards or whatever it is, step into those, and then in a hard rolled map, they hurt. Tanky builds take shitloads of damage from that. But because I can't see anything, because I try to play good builds, then I can't see anything, then I'm dead. So even like these well-telegraphed abilities, there's other issues that feels like they need to solve for that to be actually a functional system.
I don't think there's any phrase that pisses me off more than slow telegraphed attack in this game, because there's just no indication in Path of Exile what is going to, like, sure, there are loads of slow telegraphed attacks, but there's no indication which of those slow telegraphed attacks are actually going to be dangerous and what is going to do 0 damage. There are so many slow telegraphed attacks that do absolutely nothing, that until you've died to it, you have no like reason to think that it's dangerous. And there's some things that, like, okay, let's like try to learn. Let's try to learn what this is by getting hit by one of them, and that one hits you, right? And it's just this tiny wee thing. And that was actually like the number one thing that I wanted to bring up on the podcast that I didn't get to, because it was probably the only thing I cared about not being able to bring up, was in Delve, right? There's this fucking huge plasma ball. It's literally the size of the screen. It looks like it should do 10k damage at least. It's more intimidating than the Val Oversoul 20-second wind-up slam, right? Like, it's so fucking slow. It does like 30 damage. And then you have things like the fucking, like, remember early Heist, the detonating robots there? You have so many things like Legion Pocket Sand. It's like, sure, yeah, it's a well-telegraphed attack, but it doesn't really look intimidating when someone goes like, pya! Like, it's just, there's so many things in Path of Exile that make no fucking sense. Just like, please make things that are gonna do a lot of damage look intimidating and be consistent with it. Like, same with like, same in logbooks now, right? There's this huge fucking circle on the ground. It was terrifying. It's slow as fuck. Does nothing. But, and then there's like those like small invisible blue bubbles that you can barely see. Now they one-shot me. What?
Yeah. I mean, there's that problem, and then you to further emphasize on that, there's the problem with the aura stacking, which they are attending to, from my understanding, right? But like, you can sit on a super hard rare with a bunch of pack, you see them, you're fighting them, or you're finally killing them, and then you see you die, and you watch the clip, and there's a white skeleton on the side of the screen who hits you. And when you go back into the map and you go to this goddamn overpowered white skeleton, turns out he had 3 rares with aura stacking modifiers around him, and that's why he one-shot you. It's the same concept, right? But just different aspects of it, and it's just so annoying. But at least the aura stack is getting fixed, but that doesn't fix the problem that you're bringing up, Zizaran.
Yeah, very frustrating.
I think a big part that plays into that feeling, especially for newer players, that they don't know when to expect big damage and not, is this huge prevalence of dodge and block and damage avoidance meta, where one time or like 6 times you get hit for nothing, and then the 7th time you just get randomly clapped and you're dead. And there's no visual feedback really to whether you dodged a hit and how much that damage would have done to you if you hadn't dodged or blocked it. And well, unless of course you don't get stun immunity with block, then you have the stun animation from the blocked hit, sure. But that I don't think that's sufficient. Most people don't look at their characters in the middle of combat, especially it's impossible. It's covered in MTX and it's phasing and
Same with the Maven orbs when the first thing Maven came out. Like I remember Dan was like, okay, let's try to face tank one of these, and then he hadn't really noticed that there were 3 inside each other because they were like perfectly frame on frame. And he was like, okay, let's try to face tank one of these to see how much damage. Oh, I'm dead. Awesome.
Yeah. No, it would be really cool. I mean, I'm sure they have something reminiscent of that or like something that resembles that, but they need an internal scale of what sort of visual layers of tells they add to different monster animations so that there's a clear tiered system for hits that are supposed to deal around 5 to 10% of your average player HP, hits that are supposed to deal 10 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, and then gradually add up visual effects on those, make the animations more majestic, add more particle effects, more warning colors like red or yellow, bright stuff that really makes you go, oh, okay, I better don't stand in this. And
Sorry.
No, I mean, I 100% agree there needs to be better communication of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But
I think that what I find hilariously amusing is that for a game company that keeps referring to Diablo 2 consistently in pretty much every second sentence, they seem to just forget fundamental core aspects of it. First off, being Diablo 2 is an ancient game for boomers, whilst Path of Exile is the modern state right now, and they're completely different games of the similar genre, or same genres, right? So that's the first problem. But like in Diablo 2, they have well telegraphed abilities. In Diablo 2, things that look scary are scary. I mean, how could they miss something so fundamental?
I agree.
I don't know.
Goals in D2?
The only thing in D2 though,
dead. So fucking scary.
Act 3 though, the small little pygmy motherfuckers.
Oh yeah. Maybe they really like that because they don't make sense in D2 either.
Yeah, that's like the only thing in D2 I can think of that doesn't look scary. But after you encounter your first pack, you better know they're scary. You know they're terrifying. Like, but other than that, it's like everything else makes sense, right? I lost a level 98 Necromancer in hardcore to that.
Me too, my sword. It's one of the first times I properly bawled my eyes out over a video game. I had taken a break from leveling my level 98 sword because that was an endeavor. It took like months of grinding. And there was a new patch, and they changed the mercs in D2, and yeah, my friend was like, try the new mercs. And the merc killed a doll, and it exploded on my character and killed it.
Oh, I was gathering minions before I was going to play, and I was in Act 3 for some reason, and I kissed my ex-girlfriend at the time. Good night. And I turned back and I'm dead. There was some range shit that shot projectiles through between my skeletons. So I turned back and I'm dead. I've never cried over a death in a game before, but that one hurts.
Yeah. I do wish they would stop referencing D2 because as much as I love D2 and it was a great game, especially for its time, it's very old. It doesn't really hold up to standard. Same reason, like, I found it very strange when I saw Path of Exile players on Reddit were saying like, PoE is so fucking slow now. It's the slowest it's ever been. I can't wait for D2 remastered. I'm like, oh no. What do you mean? Like PoE now is like 60, 70 times faster than D2. Come on.
You can nearly go make a coffee in between packs in D2. Like, it was such a slower game. What?
Yeah, that was wild to me.
What's really fun though is that Flask and ability usage are
Yeah.
reactive to the threats around you. You
Yeah.
really need to be proactive.
And then they took my least favorite part of D2, immunities. So immunities always felt so pointless to me. Same in like the way they've done immunities in Path of Exile now. Like, I'd be infinitely happier if they weren't here this league because they either do nothing or I just can't do it. So it's always a free mod. And there's nothing I can do. I'm never gonna have like in D2, at least you were like somewhat encouraged to run hybrid builds, right? Like you could have a Hydra Frozen Orb build. If you're say you're an Essence Drain character, just a random example of a build I've never tried. If you're an Essence Drain character, like what would be your second damage type be? Nothing. You have no other option. You're just
Explodey chest.
It's like sure, it's a good way of like rewarding people for reading, I guess, but like definitely not my favorite thing to do anyway.
I thought about that on my Cold.Occultist. I thought, when I accidentally unlock cold immunity, I can kite other packs in there, kill them with the cold damage, and Profane Bloom will explode them, deal chaos damage, and then kill the monsters. But obviously you're not scaling a lot of generic damage, so the explosions don't deal that much damage.
I mean, since if you really want to play a ED Contagion build, I saw this guy been out there for ages now. It's made by some guy called Zizaran.
All right.
Try that out.
All right.
Skeletal mages, by the way, is really good for those because they deal 3 different kinds of damage.
Yeah.
So you can just blatantly ignore them, which is great until you accidentally hit all 3. Because you stopped reading them because none of them mattered. You just pop, 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 pop. Oh, hang on. They're immune to all 3 now. Oh.
Yeah. It's just very strange to me. I'd way rather have things like the other mods that are like very clearly like, dangerous.
Mm.
Oh, yeah.
It's funny with the immunities. I like when GGG announced that modifiers would have meaningful impact and be really scary, and then they promote immunity to cold. Like that's not challenging. That's
Some
not
of them are
challenging to
great,
it.
though.
But then when we play the league, suddenly there's like modifiers that are absolutely god awful, like duration of poison and bleed and all those when you don't have flash charges.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the hell?
I would way rather have like way more rewards around those types of things, and then have more of those like the scarier things. Because like you're like there's like a problem that's like most builds would have to deal with, and then you're clearly very rewarded for CI. The bleed one as well is very scary. Cannot leech. Like I don't know. Like those things are like I can do that, but it'll be very very scary.
Even the like remove 10% of life and energy shield per hit or mana in a mom build, those are like that makes that a lot more dangerous.
Yep.
Why is Culling Strike there?
That's hilarious.
Like, why is Culling Strike there? I mean, what? Like PB builds, bye bye. Low life builds, bye bye.
Why is it not colored like the immunities at least?
Yeah, exactly. That's worse than an immunity. I mean, like my Spectre build, for example, like if I see muted cold, I pop it anyways. All I have to do is unequip the gloves, wait till the pack's over, and then if we equip the gloves, then I'm done. As long as it's not a Fist Reflect map, it's fine. I mean, it's like most of them are more like a nuisance, or it's like, oh, I can't do that. It's not challenging. It's like I cannot do that, so I will just not do it. But like some of the modifiers, like we're talking about, are so devastating. But then on the other hand, they're not highlighting can't crit, and so every cast a crit build is like. That happened to me. That happened to me on my cast and crit. I had a Cyclone cast and crit build for a little bit. It was terrible. Don't worry about it. But I did that because it's not colored. It was and I just went cycloning into a pack, and I'm like, what's going on? Oh no, I can't cast anything.
I had that same sort of situation now that I'm playing a physical build, the Bone Shatter Jug, after my Cold Dot died. And with Cold Dot, obviously I did all the physical immune, and now I just 3 times or so already I opened Phys immune, and I just had to run away from the excavation because I couldn't do shit. But I really in those cases I think it's good because it's sort of a player error to not read. But in general, I think you don't need to have immunities to accomplish the same sort of punishment. You could just have a very, very high damage reduction, like 90-95%, and people would still walk away from the encounter in order to avoid the thing.
Yeah, I way more prefer like the dodge and block ones. Like they feel
Yeah.
very punishing. Like you feel fuck,
Absolutely.
I fucked up. But then you like start realizing, or you look at the thing on like to the left of your shop MDX button, and you're like, oh yeah, I have 90% dodge. This feels awful, or crazy amounts of block. And then you're like, then you're an old school player, and you realize that there's an anti-block gem that you can do a vendor recipe for that like literally nobody has any idea exists until you do it on stream. And then they're like, there's a block gem. What?
No. That's how we go through all
It's not from the
Grandmasters.
vendors, right? There's only you do it with a vendor recipe, right? You
It's
can't buy
a
it.
quality 20 evasion shield and a puncture gem. Gives you an anti-block gem.
Which,
That
by
is
the
not
way,
what
that
So
recipe makes no
obscure.
sense. Like, that makes no sense. What? What does that got to do with anti-block? But anyway.
But talking about obscure things and randomly getting killed without a big telegraph, I had this death on my cold dot character a couple of days back where I was doing a blight in a red map, and I had this. I wanted to ask, do you guys know Arduk, the monkey boss, ape boss from Blight that does the slamming the ground with his two arms, and at the same time there's like an effect like the rampage explosion, like a wave coming out from him, and it deals chunky damage. But I got chipped from him like for 2k, like 3 times in a row, and I was still standing there planning to reposition after the next hit, and then the next one hit me for 4k and I was dead.
Oh.
And I wonder whether that's just the mechanic of how that boss works, that the hits get bigger in the sequence, or is it that there was a subfist sneaking up from behind him? Because I don't think subfist should double the damage. Maybe it was the subfist plus a crit. But anyway,
Yeah,
my
I mean,
cluelessness
it's
about
crazy.
that is evident.
Softcore player coming through. Do unique bosses in Blight actually have abilities?
Yeah, exactly. Why didn't you not one-shot it?
I mean, that's like the solution. I don't think I've actually paid any attention to any of the abilities that they do, because
Yeah.
I can't really chime in on anything.
No, but I think this really does a good job at highlighting the core problem of 2 core problems, actually, of me not being able to tell what exactly I could have done better in that situation, other than not standing in the AoE to begin with. And on the other hand, of, the game so much favoring players that can instantly kill things before they can react.
Yep. That's always been the case.
Yeah, and to
Like,
some degree it will always
Deathlog,
be.
and they've like tried to explain why they can't do one.
I've never accepted their answer for why they can't give us a deathlog.
Why?
It doesn't make any sense.
Yes, it does.
Well, because they were always like, well, we can't do that because it would just tell you what killed you, but it might not be what actually killed you.
Well, that's one part of the explanation. The
No,
other
no,
one would be it
but
would be a
like-
lot of stats to keep track of that would slow down the game performance.
Right. So what they
Right.
say is like they can't give a proper in-depth deathlog because that would be too much server resources, right? It's not an offline game. It's not done on the client side, and they can't make it done on the client side. And people have done calculations on how it was like 40% increase in server load, which would make the game laggy and unplayable, right? So let's say that you agree, you realize that they can't do an in-depth one, right?
Mhm.
And then you can be like, well, why don't we get the China one? Well, so the China one, like I've played there, that one for the most part tells you very, very little, right? Like you'll be killed by a pack of monsters and it'll be like you were killed by strange barrel. And you're like, well, that can't be it. Well, that did the last 38 damage to you. And then some people will be like, well, that's better than nothing. Well, the thing is, generally, when things like that get added in the game, a lot of people do start complaining and be like, well, we want it better. And they have said they can't do it better. So they would rather give us nothing than have people complain about the worst one.
So the bit that confuses me is probably just because I don't understand coding, programming, anything like that. I have no idea. But my very, very simple 2-head brain says that I can't understand why it can't be done on the client, because the client doesn't do any of the damage calculations, but it does get all the damage. Otherwise, I wouldn't know I died. Like, the damage that gets dealt to me is still sent to my client. That's how I see myself die. So why do those calculations on the server at all? Because obviously that can't be done. But why can't my client do it? And maybe that's just me being like 2-head. I don't really understand how any of this programming works. But I don't know. question never got asked and never got answered, and so I'm just not ready to give up on that until I hear it. Until I hear the reason. I need a reason.
But they clearly would want it in their game, right? Like it's just never done on the client at all. Like, because the more you do on the client side, the more sources for abuse you have, right? Same reason why Path of Exile doesn't have a single player side. They just don't want a lot of that accessible. That's when you start seeing abuse, like for example, Grim Dawn, right?
Hmm.
And I mean, like obviously they want their game to be as good as possible. That way they make more money. It's not like they like purposely want you to not know.
To my understanding, the client side is calculating the damage you're receiving, and then it's just sending to the client. You took X damage in this roll. You took X damage that roll. You took Y damage that roll.
Like
So it's
per
not-
server tick, it's just giving you an end number.
Yeah, it
That's
keeps
my
track of your
understanding.
HP, and it even prioritizes whether you're dead or alive over updating your HP number. But I don't think the client
Yeah.
exactly knows where which damage came from at a given point.
Because that's how I understand it.
maybe
And it
that-
does the same
maybe
with
that's the
enemies
case.
as well. A clear display of that, because I had a discussion about that with a couple others that actually do programming, and they don't know either, but they gave me pretty compelling arguments around it, was when I killed the Oshalbi in, it was, the boss was dead before the boss was seen on my screen. When the boss is seen on my screen, or attackable on the screen, she is in the process of popping out loot, but she has full HP in the bar up top, and then it's updating the next frame. She has no HP bar, but she's already halfway through the process of spawning the loot. Then the HP bar goes away, and the loot pops out. So like, with the different frames, it's basically telling my client, this boss is dead, by the way. And at the same time, it sent me the information that she's attackable now, and then that goes in those senses. So if my client were to get the information, I would have seen the boss with full HP, and I would have then seen the damage be low to 0, and then the animation of her popping out loot would have started. But that's not what my client was receiving.
And just as an idea of how much like worse it would be if they did have like a proper deathlog, just look at the difference already between lockstep and predictive. Like literally try playing on lockstep, then try playing on predictive. It's like 2 worlds apart.
Yeah.
I can't play on predictive at all. Australian internet, I guess. It's horrible. I rubber band everywhere. I never know what
Yeah,
kills me.
you rubber band everywhere, but the experience will be very smooth. Like the game will run very smoothly.
I don't think I've played on lockstep since they removed Delirium. Because, well, not removed, but since running those maps became not a thing we did anymore, I haven't turned it back on predictive once because my game does not run smoothly on predictive at all.
Yeah.
I think that's an Australian internet problem rather than.
Yeah, because
I
I
know a lot
normally
of-
recommend
lot of
like
people
people that
love
are
it.
having like kind of weak PCs and a lot of lag. If they're on softcore, a lot of people can switch to predictive and gain like crazy performance on that because the networking side and with lockstep confirming where you are, like it uses so much. So a lot of people can be better off playing predictive, even if they'll die to desyncs now and again. Like that's not really big unless you're pushing for level 100.
It's fair. Well, at least that's a reason why the client can't do it. That kind of makes sense. No one ever said that anytime I've complained about it. Anytime I've been like, why can't I just have the client do it? No one's had an answer. Suddenly everyone had an answer. I don't know where that came from, but I'm
Just based off arguments I've heard, that's not necessarily true, though. All I'm saying is that
it would make
that
sense,
sounded
and if that's
logical.
it would make sense, and if that's the case, then yeah, okay, sure, that makes sense. But like I said, like I have no idea how to program, no idea how to do any of the database stuff. Like I'm not smart. That is not a thing. So yeah, I don't know. I just never understood it, and I kind of always wanted a deathlog.
I mean, I think everybody wants a deathlog.
Yeah,
Would certainly
fair.
be cool. But if you think about it being a super complicated implementation, and that would take away from other stuff they could be doing, then it's. I'm willing to not have a deathlog if that means we get good leagues, good balance states, and generally a positive direction of the game in other departments.
I'm not interested in taking a month or two's time of development for a deathlog. That's not.
Dude,
I want one, but it's not that important.
the funniest thing to me is when people are like complaining about the MTX tweets. Like, oh, you guys should be working on the game instead. It's like, yes, the art designers.
graphic design,
if they weren't pumping out MTX, they would go and fix some coding issues. That's how this shit works, bro.
The guy whose job it is to draw, he's gonna deal with database problems. If he wasn't so busy drawing, he'd be over there.
That plus the fact that the MTX that they're selling is actually the money that they need in order to pay for the people who actually do the work on the game.
Yep.
So
that is
smell
always
like
hilarious.
if they were to send those people over to fix the coding, I mean, sooner or later we would have a game that looks like Volson.
Yeah, Wilson looks very pretty.
It does.
It does.
Gorgeous
Artwork
game.
designers did everything there, though.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Yep.
Just
That
saying.
makes sense.
That's not false. That was good. That's a good one.
All right.
That's really good. I'm gonna steal that one.
Do we quickly want to go and mention Zizaran's number one passion topic of chase uniques in the game? And I don't know, there's probably not that much to be said, because we probably all agree that the change of Conqueror uniques and Elder Guardian and Shaper Guardian uniques into the global drop pool was a not so good one. I mean, we all probably want those items to be more accessible, but taking away the desirable, or many of the desirable outcomes for fighting these bosses, and on top of that, a deterministic, more or less deterministic way to chase those items down in SSF is a bad thing. Or is there a different take in the room?
Nah, I think everyone agrees with that, right? Like, it's just worse for everyone. They're now worthless, and I can't go and intentionally farm one if I'm in solo self-found.
Yeah, I
So-
mean, I don't necessarily care about the solo self-found aspect, because in my opinion, solo self-found shouldn't matter. Like, that's like a challenge you impose on yourself. But
True.
I'm frustrated. Like, I do wish there was more target farming, like in trade league as well. That's like always what I've liked, like being able to specifically chase down items, and especially having access to like both, like things being exciting in the global pool and it's something that you want to like target farm.
No, I agree. They shouldn't balance the game around SSF or make heavy-handed design decisions around SSF. But in a way, SSF players are oddly representative of your average casual trade league player, because most don't really engage with trade all that much beyond buying some very, very needed items. They don't min-max the trade approach, and they try to mostly get by not trading.
Sure.
So that's a very valid perspective there. Yeah, I don't know. I
kind of like, I want to chime in there. I like this whole with target farming. I feel like there's so many things they could do that would be helpful for the general enjoyment of the game. Different things you can do outside of, oh, this is that end game, that's that end game, and that's that end game. Pick one of the three, have fun, as an example, right? But if they had target farming, it would be very different for the end game players, but it will also be very helpful and help newer players be in a situation where they have other endgame choices to do, other than you're going to juice the shit out of this map with these watch turns and these passives, or you're going to do delving, or you're going to do endgame boss farming this way. And the easy solutions is like, you know, stack decks on div cards. If they were to make sure that you farm chevrons, which has been a very commonly brought up topic, after Zizaran mentioned it as well. It's like, say you kill chevrons, she has a higher chance of dropping chevrons wrappings. And you can get I was about to say pity dick again. I've been watching Deadpool too much. Like you get a pity reward of getting the Shavs card from killing her. And that Shav card cannot drop anywhere else. If you want the Shavs, that's what you do. But there's still a slim chance that you drop it when you're killing monsters, because no one opens a map expecting and thinking that, oh, when I kill this pack, I might drop a mirror, I might drop a chevrons. That's not what people think. You kill that monster pack, and you run to the next pack and the next pack after. Then you realize, wait, there was a loot sound. Let me go back and check what it was. That's how people play the game. And like having something to farm, so that if you know that if I invest my time in farming this boss specifically over and over and over again, I will eventually get it. And if I don't, at least I get the pity rewards and fragments of it that will give me, say the div cards will give me a chance to get it. So if I don't get it from the kills, eventually I'll have a chance of getting it from the div card, and therefore I'd be more encouraged to farm it. And those type of farms should be more emphasized in the game, in my opinion.
I don't mind shavs being from stack decks. Like that's actually an okay one, especially since it is a build enabling unique that can be doesn't necessarily need to be 40x. But boss uniques, that's where really should not drop from stack decks or diviners. They should be
Watcher's Eyes.
Yeah. I don't mind Watcher's Eyes. I don't mind that you get that from a Lich. That's fine. That's another boss that you can't necessarily find as easily. But it should definitely be from bosses.
Yeah.
Most Watcher's Eyes, I think, come from stack decks.
Yeah.
Do they? Really?
No, I mean, probably not most.
Maybe not most.
Most Starforges come from.
A fairly decent chunk of them
Starforges definitely.
Certainly a fairly decent chunk of Watcher's Eyes on the market just come from.
I mean, well, they might as well just buff them as well, because right now nobody. Wasn't it you, System, mentioned that as well? Like, at the point where you kill Uber at Siri to drop in a serious disfavor, your build is stronger than what that serious disfavor would give you. Granted, serious disfavor is a kind of a bad example because it's a vendor item these days compared to pretty much anything else at this point of the game, but it still rings true for most boss unique items right now.
Yep.
Like, for example, the Maven, Viridian's Veil. That's really good for totem bills. That's about it. Other than that, it's the Maven orb you're looking for. And Viridian's Veil crashes in Softcore almost immediately because people start farming it, right? Before that, it's really profitable.
It's never about boss uniques being worth money. That's completely based on the economy. They need to be useful and have uses. Look at the Awakener helmet, right? That's one of the strongest helmets in the game, and it's probably 1C on Softcore.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. Definitely. Yeah, I'm not too worried about the worth, but I don't know. I just hate stack decks, man. I mean, hate them.
If the uniques were stronger and actually usable, and they weren't coming from stack decks and div cards, they would also be more valuable. That's going to go hand in hand. But it's it's incentivizing the target farming is what I'm looking for mostly. Maybe shavs, even if shavs, no matter that discussion, boss-specific uniques should drop from those, and the only div cards that is related to those should only exist from those. To my understanding, we have the problem with, what do you do with Jack's box or Jack in the Box div cards, the ones that gives a random unique? Will they be nerfed in that situation as well? But then again, we're moving the discussion to the point of providing solutions, right?
Jack in the Box already cannot drop boss uniques.
What?
Yeah, there's the other div cards that has the same feature, like the.
I'd like to disagree. I did get a serious disfavor from Jack in the Box.
No, you can get it from the Void, not from Jack in the Box.
Oh, it was from the Void. Sorry, you're right. Yeah, true. Because Void has all the outcomes of other.
The Void is a great example of a div card that will give you that access to it, right? But all I'm saying is, I think we all agree that we want the target farming to be there, and if there is div cards, because they're not going to be able to remove the div cards, which they already responded to, right? But they could make them only drop from that boss. Sorry?
Yeah, they can't remove div cards, and they also don't need to. There's no reason to remove div cards.
Yeah, they can just balance the drop locations and balance them in a way.
Do you think it would make sense?
Encourages it.
You think it would make sense to divide div cards in two cards, like common div cards and rare div cards, and then you could only get common ones from stack decks, or would that undermine the purpose of stack decks being a desirable outcome?
The rare ones that are good that you can get, like Exalted Orb ones and things like Combs Heart, Shavs, etc. Like generic.
Even a Doctor card being able to come out of that is still fine.
Yeah.
It's just that,
literally just uniques.
Yeah, if there's a card for Starforge, in my brain, the only place that card should drop is, an amount of times more common than the actual Starforge drop from the boss who drops Starforge. Right? I go fight Shaper, sword didn't drop. I was chasing that. It's meta right now for whatever reason. That's the sword I'm after. I go farm Shaper. If I don't get the sword, eventually I start dropping cards. I build a sword from Shaper. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I get a Starforge in tier 2 maps because I opened stacked decks. Not great.
And the problem is never like you're never gonna find one yourself. So for like an SSF point of view, they're actually pretty balanced. Like their stack decks are fine, right? Part of the reason why I've been like kind of forced to play SSF. It's a very massive problem on Trade League where you can just trade with other players and buy them. And it doesn't even have to be directly from the boss. It can be from other bosses too. It just there's so little value around bosses right now in Path of Exile that a lot of them might as well not exist.
Yeah, definitely. Some of them don't even exist, like Rashabi.
Sure.
Oh.
Actually.
Yeah,
It's like
No,
it's like
that's
the
a fair
placebo thing. They're like, yeah, we have Shabby fragments. Nobody sees it. And it's the same thing when they said they nerfed the serious monsters, the serious influence monsters. We nerfed them, but I'm hellbent and I'm still sticking to that story. They said they nerfed them, but they didn't. There's no way in hell they nerfed them. They're just as strong as they were pre-nerf.
Like the Cyrus monsters? No, they've been
Yeah.
nerfed.
No,
Oh,
they
no.
got
That's just
hard.
placebo. Stop. It's
No,
just
no,
placebo,
no.
dude.
No, they've been nerfed
That's just
hard.
placebo, man.
But they still hurt, but they're nowhere near what they were before.
Yeah.
They're still too stupid.
I mean, I wouldn't even be against them being nerfed again, to be honest. Like, they
Sure.
still are very dangerous.
Yeah, they're very manageable now.
out of my
Maybe
control.
if you don't take Necroagus.
But I am playing softcore, so I should, right?
No.
True.
Exactly. Now, but for real though, when it comes to the bosses, it's they definitely would be more incentivizing for people to actually do the fights if they just to get the item, even if it's not valuable, depending on the market, right? Because ignoring the market aside, being able to target farm something is encouraging for casual players, people that don't have access to farm things or get the currency to buy the items. They have the possibility to now say, hey, I want the Starforge, I can't afford one, but if I do this type of content and I put my Atlas passes, whatever, depending on how much they play, right, I'm able to encounter Shaper every now and then, and I can eventually get one. And that would be a really nice to do it with that as a specific example, right? And I think that's something that really needs to be in the game.
Yeah. So basically, just take all the boss drops out of the stack decks and put those div cards where you get the uniques, or at least in some places that are equally hard to get to and hard to beat the content in order to get the reward. It's fine if there's like a temporary, like we said earlier with Harvest in this league, a temporary bypass of some progression for the league, but as a permanent thing in the game, stack decks granting access to boss uniques is pretty bad, I agree. And so splitting them again into two different tiers, maybe not call them common and rare, I just said that. It's not supposed to be actually based on the rarity of the div cards, but just ones that you can get from stack decks and ones that you can't. And then it would be okay for a league mechanic to also hand out the ones that you can't get from stack decks, but not in a permanent sense.
As a side note, the other thing they do is massively skip progression in a trade league. For instance, before anyone makes it to red maps for the very first time in a trade league, you can fight and kill Uber Elder.
Mm-hmm.
No one's been in red maps, no one's killed Shaper, no one's killed Elder. But you can fight and kill Uber Elder and start getting Uber Elder Watcher's Eyes before anyone is in red maps in the entire league. And not just like once, but you could just sit there and farm it, or that you could just buy the cards and farm it, and that could be the thing you do 8-9 hours into a league when no one's in red maps. Like,
Yeah.
Now I can verify that is extremely lucrative on league release.
yeah, and that's not good. You shouldn't be able to do that. Like that's not something that should exist. And that is also a stack deck problem. Like that's what that is. That's stack decks. I hate them. I hate them.
I like stack decks, just don't like the implementation.
Mm.
But you do think there would still be a compelling enough reward even if all the boss uniques are out? I mean, yeah, obviously, don't have to talk about that again. Yeah. They're great. One more point that I quickly want to talk about before we go into the final big topic and round things off, because we're already a little bit over time. I hope I'm not taking away too much of your times. one big thing I wanted to talk about is, what do you think about the teased edition of the new Uber versions of existing past content? Are you hyped about getting like an Uber domain of timeless conflict?
I love it.
About breach zones,
Yep.
or do you see problems with that? I know Balor loves his aspirational content.
Yep.
Absolutely love it. Best idea they had. Like I wish nearly every content had an Uber version. I'm such a big fan of Edziri and Uber Edziri.
And
I
Uber
really
Lab.
like what they've done with the ring from Edziri and Uber Edziri, that both of them can drop the ring and that the Uber version has one more stat, so it's better. I wish most bosses had something similar to that. I think it's a really cool mechanic. And then you have something like, okay, like you don't want to put as much time in, you can like still like try the boss, experience the boss, but obviously for like the best items you need to have a really solid build and know what you're doing.
I
Are you-
absolutely love it. Like it kind of goes hand in hand with our previous topic with target farming, because a lot of the previous league mechanics, quite a few of them has that. Like you get the timeless jewels from Legion, you get the breaches with their specific loot tables. So having like Uber versions of those just feels to me that it goes hand in hand with that part of the game. So if they introduced Uber breach, I'd be all over it. And that would be absolutely amazing, because that's one of the best leagues in my opinion for a lot of reasons, even if the league mechanic was really generic, to be fair. I think it was amazing. And I think that a lot of leagues we've seen in the past present that kind of approach, and adding an Uber version to that just be, the golden ticket to the chocolate factory.
Yeah.
Yeah, are you worried at all that adding like a new tier of existing content on top of the existing content would devalue the existing content? Like in the same way that when Betrayal added the ability to enrich and enhance breach zones and make the higher tier ones, I always felt that breach zones were really good until then, and now a regular breach zone doesn't feel quite as good anymore. Are you worried that that same thing will happen if there's new Uber endgames?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid concern. I don't feel like we have that with Edziri and Uber Edziri, and I think a really good way. So if you had to do normal breach zones to get pure breach zones, we wouldn't have that problem, and that's why Edziri is so good. The problem right now is that if you're running a normal breach zone, you're doing that instead of the pure breach zone. So
You're
that's
giving up
why
your
that's a problem.
chance. Giving up your chance to upgrade it to a pure.
Yep.
And if you happen across that the next day, you're like, oh, I could upgrade. Oh no, I ran a garbage one yesterday. What a waste. That would be much better if you just had a chance at upgrading them while running them or something.
Yep.
Oh god, or got splinters for the higher one.
Enriched splinters, pure splinters.
Oh. Sorry, I just threw up in my mouth a little while I said that.
The fragment tab will be bigger than the other one than the
Yeah.
Maybe
And
a different
think-
solution to that.
I think things at Edziri as well, whenever things like that are still valuable, then you actually do get a trickle up economy, like Rimro talks a lot about in his videos, right? Because we used to have that. You used to have like players that are like, okay, I'm not good enough to farm Uber Edziri, but Uber Edziri is so profitable that people will pay me good money for me to farm normal Edziri and sell my fragments. So then it is actually useful.
Yeah. That was a very good point, that like farming regular Edziri is a path to Uber Edziri, and that's, I think, one part of the equation. The other part is them being or them having individual drop pools, because right now you can, from pure Chiyula, you can't get anything that you can't get from a lower Chiyula. You just have a higher chance, right? And so that you're heavily skewed towards running the Uber version, or the pure version in this case. So having some compelling rewards for the lower tier ones, maybe not quite as valuable, obviously, but something like Edziri's Promise, although people probably going to say kick W because it's so nerfed, but having something...
But Edziri's Promise is still very, very good. Even, obviously, especially pre-nerf. And even then, right, it was just a rarity issue. Like, you could have put you could have done Edziri's Promise as an Uber Edziri drop instead of the gloves, and now it suddenly would have been like a chase item.
All right, great. I think we're all on the same page of that. And then before we completely finish this thing, I would quickly like to talk about the upcoming interview with Chris on Ghazzy's channel, and of course the past interview. Ziz, you already said that there was one thing that you wish you would have brought up, one topic. Are there more things that like questions, follow-ups where you would have liked to have phrased it differently or gone harder on not letting Chris go as easily, or just asked it in a different way?
Probably, but I hadn't thought enough about that. Like, it's mostly like the graphical effects thing, and I don't know. I think a lot of things he did. I was very happy by the fact that he was like, okay, we haven't thought enough about defense. We're going to start doing that for 3.16 and make sure that's a priority. And a lot of things, yeah, we like gotta wait and see, I guess.
There's one thing that I wanted to say about this whole thing, and I really, don't get me wrong, I love Methil. Methil is a pretty cool guy. And I also think it is really cool that when he was on your podcast, that he sided with Chris on many things and didn't chime in with the rage mode or anything, but like had this sort of, get good attitude, which I share to some degree. But I think in some situations, like a handful, it was counterproductive to the discussion on the podcast, because he was sort of shutting down your question and allowed Chris to get away with saying much less than he would have said, which I think is something to look out for, maybe for Ghazzy in the upcoming thing. I mean, like I said, I fully respect and agree with Mathil's opinion in many ways, but I think it could have led to Chris giving us more information instead of Mathil saying like a whole paragraph and then Chris saying, yeah, I basically agree with Mathil.
Right. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Is there anything you have learned, Ghazzy, from the past interviews that you're going to do different in your interview?
I think that both Baeclast and System Mathil did really bad. No. No, I think that it was. I think it was really good. Both of them. What I felt was really important was that we content creators raises the voices of the people that don't have one, and I think that both shows or both interviews did that exceptionally well. And I think that's really shines through how we content creators do our best for the greater good of the community, because we all understand that the foundation of the game is based of not us, very much not us. And I think that we did a very good job, you guys did a very good job in that. What I learned from the past two podcasts, I mean, I think that it's depending on how we approach it. I will have Crouching Tune and Grim Road that once with me. And something that we felt that we need to do is, no matter how much my personal enjoyment and of the whole idea of hard mode is going to be very fun to do, I feel like we want to make sure that we don't want to spend time talking about hard mode. We don't want to spend time referencing and talking about what things were in D2. What we want to do is try to provide, as basically what the other guys have done already. We want to provide context to the issue that we're asking about, so that both viewers and Chris can understand the question without a fault, and then provide us with an answer. And then do our best to not avoid to argue about the discussion, to move on to the next question, so that we power through as many questions as possible. But I think it's important when it comes to the point of discussing questions, that when it's suitable to do it, like we saw that both in the system and we saw that on Baeclast as well, when an answer is provided that seems that needs to be argued about, it should be argued about, and I think that's very important. And that's something we saw, because my initial thought when the interview was starting before Baeclast, I was like, okay, I hope they're just going to ask the questions, get an answer, move on, get as many out there as possible, right? And then when the discussion emerged, that it just for me, it just revealed that in some cases it is needed to bring a discussion to the table.
Yeah,
that's how I see it.
Although, to be fair as well, if I don't think you're gonna be able to not have references to hard mode and stuff unless you literally go like, "Shut up, Chris! Stop talking about hard mode." Like he's going to reference hard mode in D2.
Yeah, that he's hard coded for that. That's not something we've learned from much of the previous episodes.
And PoE 2.
Yeah, like I think that a lot of people feel like they want to have answers to the problems now, not 3.17. But then again, some of the questions are answered by that's something that's coming in 3.16, 3.17, right? So I think it's a bit hard to tackle those things, and I guess it also comes down to perspective, right? Because I mean, I have my personal opinions. The next person has their opinions, and I think it's impossible to find a middle ground. So instead, I think it's just good to have a united front and approach it in a way that everyone feels comfortable. And I think the more important. Sorry.
I think a thing that's like really, really annoying from the community side is I feel like a lot of people are expecting Chris to go, yeah, Chris, that's a really good point you brought up from the community. Hold on, let me alt tab on my laptop. I'm gonna adjust some numbers. Okay, that is now fixed. The next time you log in, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of these things are things that they do have. So like people keep like memeing on them, like we hear you. Like what else are they gonna say? You want him to fucking alt tab and do some quick coding right there on the spot? Like,
yeah. But based on what I think it was Chris Wilson, I'm not sure. I don't want to quote it or anything, but GGG did express themselves in a way that they talked about coming up with solutions and then discussing it with the community, and that is so wonderful to hear because Chris is doing these interviews, they're listening, they are listening to us, and they're taking that to heart, and they're going to do whatever they can and then bring that forward. Now, I'm a person that I absolutely hate a lot of what's happening with the league and the community right now. I'm still having fun with the game, but I also know due to the years of experience that we all have in the game, that we know that they are going to do something about this. Question is what? And when they say we're going to discuss this with the community, that to me feels like a good reinsurance that they are listening to us and that they're going to talk to the community about it, and then the fix is going to come in that hopefully will be a good middle ground for everyone, right? Or at least the majority. So I think that's pretty good to see.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that's Balor, you have something on that? But yeah, I think it's going to be a long ongoing process. Just to quickly summarize my thought in one sentence is I don't expect immediate solutions, and I don't expect all of the community issues being immediately understood and reacted upon by GGG, but throughout the podcast thing that's going to be happening hopefully for a longer period of time and more dialogue with the community and with GGG, I feel that we're going to go into a good direction. Balor, please.
I had one issue that I took with both podcasts that talked to Chris so far. And that was that there was a lot of very specific technical related questions. What are you doing about this exact thing? What are we doing about this exact thing? This exact thing is a problem. And I know that he gets to, walk away and get answers from the team and whatnot to be able to answer these specific questions. But at least for me specifically, I don't really care about the individual specific problem that's happening in each individual part, because they always manage to eventually fix them, and they've all been, like, tons of them have been mentioned 100 times. And I feel like the questions I want to see Chris asked more of are more large, long-term direction style questions rather than this individual mechanic is not doing well. Whereas, and what could we do to fix this problem? But rather, I want a clearer picture of what he expects or wants the game to be in a year's time, or in 2 years' time, or in 5 years' time.
Chris,
right?
where do you see yourself in 5 years from now?
I want those longer questions. The issue with that is, while those are the questions that I personally would love to hear answers to, I don't think they're the questions that would make the majority of the community happy to hear. They don't want to hear about what the game is going to be like in 5 years. They want to know what it's going to be like next league when they log back in again, or next week after the next patch, right? Like that's what people want, but it's not what I want.
No, I feel the same way. Like I'm personally more interested in seeing what's happening from now till further down the road. But the majority of the community seems to be very like Sis said. They want Chris to be like, oh, you want the revert Flask changes? Let me tab out and fix that. Done. Okay, it's fixed. Yeah, just patch it, boys. That's what people want: instant gratification, right? And they want that fixed immediately. They want that instantaneous fix to it, and that's not going to happen. And I think that a lot of us players that have played for many years, we know that things are going to get sorted as long as we raise our voices and make sure the community are raising their voices and concerns, and they're going to look into it and further down the road. But we are interested in what's happening from now till later. A lot of us, right? But there are still things in the way that some of us have questions about, obviously. But again, it's like it's just mentioned as well, and Baeclast as well, for that matter. We want to make sure that the community is being heard, the ones that don't have a voice, right? A lot of us, if not most of us, are able to have a direct line to a GGG very easily. You can just message them, and they're very fast in responding, and you can have a healthy discussion with them at any time we want to. And most of the community can't do that in the same sense. And these interviews are a great way for us to make sure that those people are heard, right? And if the majority wants to know when are they fixing Granite Flask, or when are they doing that, then those are the questions we should be asking.
So I saw quite a lot of people brought up, I think, especially with me, is obviously I was bringing a lot of the things from the community, right, to do that, give people a voice. And whenever I'm doing that, I'm not always able to like have a longer discussion with as much like feedback and follow up. Whereas you can do that on a lot of issues that you care about yourself. So it is important to like do like a mix.
Oh, definitely. And I think it's like I'm gonna have a meeting with the other guys in a bit as well, before the interview. But it's like, I think it's important that we together as a group are going to go through the questions that will be asked, so that we feel like when we get an answer, if we have follow-up questions, and if so, what would be a follow-up questions if this is the answer or that is the answer as example, so we can speculate around it and therefore be better prepared. So when they say, like, if we a stupid example, why are you not nerfing serious monsters? That's a stupid example, right? And he says, oh, we already nerfed them, we feel that they're good. And then the follow-up question would be like, yeah, but most of us are dying all the time, or anything like that. At least be somewhat prepared for those type of responses. For the questions that we don't personally have a burning passion for, because obviously there's questions where we have a burning passion for me personally, it's Spectre gems. And I'm not talking about specific Spectres, I'm talking about the actual gem. We can go on for days on that. But obviously, formatting the questions, I think, is very crucial, so that not just Chris understands it, but he's not a problem with it. But I think it's important to word and format the questions in a way so the community understands what the point is with the question, what the issue is, so that when they hear the question and they're listening for the answer, they know what the question is about. And I think that's something both Baeclast and System Athlete did very well in providing context to the question. It was this and this and this is causing this problem. What's the plan to fix it? And I think that's a really good way to express oneself, to avoid confusion and having people being like, oh, he said they're gonna fix them, or he said this, and then another person gonna be like, no, he meant this. That we don't see that because the questions have been properly formatted, right? And I think that's important as well.
Do you have, if I may ask, do you have like a version, like a list of your questions that you're planning to ask that is publicly accessible? Like Zizaran, I know, made his list of questions public beforehand. Are you going to do the same thing and be open to feedback or input on that for part one? And part two, do you have someone who plays Chris' role when you're doing the test run with the other guys on the podcast? Do you have someone who is like, okay, Chris is going to answer this, and then you have to come up with a witty comeback?
No to the latter, but
you should.
I'm going to talk to the other guys first. The problem with it in its current format is that I have 654 questions last I checked, and I know that more than half of them is going to get removed instantaneously. So I have to like go through the entire list.
Pardon, what?
Yeah, you want to cut that down to about 10%.
Wait, I don't understand how you would have 654 questions.
There's an entire Discord server and the YouTube comments that I'm going through, and I've added them into the list.
So many duplicates.
Yeah,
there's actually not that many based on the searches I've asked my models to check. There's not that many duplicates in that list. The problem is that a lot of them are irrelevant, and a lot of them have already been asked in both previous Baeclast and with you.
Right.
So that you duplicate in that sense, absolutely.
Right.
So there's so many things that we're getting, and it's important to, in my opinion, when I ask for people to send me their questions, I haven't done anything to sort it out before adding it. I want to make sure that everyone has a chance to get them in. And then I will, in a calm manner, make sure that I go through everything and talk to the other guys with the questions that is not already answered, things that are completely irrelevant, and things that actually make sense. And then we can go through the questions that is actually important to bring up, and then go and cross-check that with the other people that has their questions as well. And there are thousands upon thousands of comments. And I've only taken like the majority of those things that have been sent to me. And I know Grimroll has surely the same amount of me, if not more.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like a stupid amount of questions. And the problem is that we need to make sure that the ones that are being asked the most are the ones that get lifted up first, right? To make sure that the majority is feeling heard. You know, there's so many aspects to it, and it's so hard to cut down. And then we're talking about that many questions to fit in, 2, 3, preferably more hours with him. It's like we can't have that many questions, obviously. That's not going to be feasible.
Just
So we
from
have
a
to make sure we take
creator
the
point of
importance.
view, you should just re-ask all the old questions from Baeclast and just like re-ask them. What about now?
What about that? Did you change your mind? Sis did this. Let me bring up his documents. I've got about 53, 54 questions here. No, but I mean, it's like, what I really like about it, because I didn't expect it to be that much. I really didn't. For me personally, I haven't talked to Grimrow. I need to ask him as well how many he has, because he's been very on top of things to get people to send him questions as well, and feedback and comments in general. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see where we land. But I was really surprised with the amount of people taking the time to raise their voice. Like, it's just crazy, both on Twitch and private messages and YouTube comments. We have a video up for half an hour, and there's already several hundred comments sharing their thoughts. And it's just crazy. But it does show how many people have a burning passion for the game. That's just the way I see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the criticism, even the harsh criticism, like Chris said on the Baeclast, we have to take into account that a lot of it comes from a place of passion and love for the game, and a sort of, a wish that it's around for many years to come.
Yeah, definitely.
Before we finish up, do you guys have any questions that you want to give Ghazzy on the way, where you're like, what is a question that you really want answered, or would you like to see discussed on Ghazzy's podcast? I'll just start, like, hooking back to the harvest topic. I would really love to hear them talk about, or Chris talk about, because I'm sure that has been internally discussed. It must have been discussed. It must have come up at some point. What he thinks about adding a cost to the harvest crafts so that they can hand them out more freely. Because, like, surely one of the big parts why they think they can't be more common is because they hand out so much raw power. Like, one half is the determinism, and the other half is the you're handing out a craft that is worth like 15x in one go to one player. It's like, a tiny mirror drop, or like a mirror shard, say. But I think they could make the crafts way more common if they actually cost a couple of X, for example. Like the augment craft, make it cost 3x, and then you could hand out 3 times as many of them, because you're also removing value from the economy at the same time as you're handing it out. And
That's
I think
your really good point. Make the game even more for the 0.1%. I like it.
Right? That's what I'm hearing. That's what that sounds like to me. That sounds like it'd be great for me. Everyone else is screwed, but I'll do it.
Yeah.
Like the problem with it is like as soon as the gate thinks around a cost, it's like when they remove accessibility, may it be gating it behind currency, because that's still going to require currency to work. The only thing that's going to happen is that will just be added on top of the fee that people will charge for you on TFT, right? Or if you trade it, or however you want to do it. But that how you express that question is I'm going through the list, and it's like
maybe I could rephrase it in a way that's more interesting to talk
similar
about.
ways of expressing it. Like, there's so many different versions of it with suggestions, with different baseline questions to it. But in the solution that they presented, or a lot of these people have presented, has been like, okay, with the trading access to it. Oh, but you can just put a gated cost to it, like an augment crit. Yeah, that's going to cost you an exalted. But I mean, it's like, the problem is, like Baller is saying, it says, it was mentioned as well, it's like, that's just going to cater to the 1%.
Yeah.
That's all it does.
You might be right. I'm just really curious to hear what the internal discussions at GGG were like about this specific topic. I didn't want to open the whole harvest can of worms again, guys. We need to finish soon. So what other questions would you like to hear answered on Ghazzy's podcast?
I have a very important question. This isn't for the podcast. This is a right now question. When do we get to see this interview? And also, who's streaming it? Where's it going up on YouTube if I miss it? Those are all very important questions.
And are we allowed to restream it live?
No.
That as well.
Yes, of course you are. Jesus.
I need the clip.
10 a.m. New Zealand time. It's gonna be easy for you, Balor. The time zone. You're welcome. Wednesday, so 25th.
Wait, so it's Tuesday night for everyone else in the world.
Yeah, that'd be Tuesday night for everyone else, right? I think so.
Do you have a GMT time for me?
No.
Okay.
Look, I'll tell
10
you what,
a.m. New Zealand time.
Okay, 9 hours from now.
We'll put together a time and date link, and
we're gonna have that.
We'll put it in the description of this as well, so people can click on it, right? Because otherwise,
it's my midnight. It's my
there'll be a link
midnight.
there at some point.
Let me just double check so I didn't lie to you.
And it's getting streamed on your channel?
Yes, my channel. We haven't really discussed. I'll take that back.
YouTube's
It's
going?
8 a.m. New Zealand time. There we go.
Okay.
8 a.m. New Zealand time. It was 10 from the start, but we changed it 8 a.m. New Zealand time. It was streamed on my stream, and we haven't discussed the YouTube, but we haven't really said anything. I was planning on putting it up on my YouTube, and then I will most likely do it.
Yoink?
Yeah. Pretty much. I'm going to talk to them this weekend, so I don't want to promise anything. But it will be on my stream, that's for sure.
Cool.
Sounds good. Well, then, does anyone have any other input for Ghazzy? The last chance? I mean, we could just in PMs and stuff like that, but publicly, is there anything that you guys want to give Ghazzy on the way before we round things off finally?
Enjoy the walls of text you're getting.
I have been up right now for 27 and a half hours.
Somebody sent me an over 2,000 word document and said, I don't know if you're still taking questions. This is the day before. I don't know if you're still taking questions, but here's some of my thoughts on what you should ask. And it was like 2,000 words. I'm like, bruh.
I thought mine was bad.
To be fair, though, I've been up this late. Has less to do with the questions and more to do with my settlement called 3.15 and the town called We Hear You in RimWorld with the latest DLC. Yeah. So that happened.
I thought
RimWorld's
mine was
amazing.
bad. I
You don't
remember-
play the game, dude. You don't ever play it. It's like you start it and suddenly it's like 3 days later.
Try
I
playing
still haven't
Kenshi.
played that.
Sorry?
Try playing Kenshi.
Kenshi. Is it good?
It's even better than RimWorld.
Ooh, don't say
Less
that.
polished. But
Now I'm supposed to go back to PoE. I'm having fun in PoE. Don't give me other games right now.
do later.
I'll have to do it later. But no, I think that like any feedback for the people watching on the YouTube and on the stream, like you're more than welcome to send private messages to both me and Grimro, post on our YouTube channels and our Discord servers. We will add the list, your comments, no matter what it is, to a big list, and then it's going to get sorted if it's relevant or not. So it's like, yeah, that's why we have a big list of comments or questions.
Nice.
All right, Zizaran, when are we going to see you baited everyone into voting for the Sharknado. When are you going to make that Cyclone build?
I really want to do custom crit, so I need a cock weapon.
Mjolnir. How
I'm
about
trying to get a
Hierophant?
Mjolnir.
Hierophant Mjolnir Mana Bond Hybrid 12k mana. But you're
Tell you what
living
you
off
don't
life
do.
and energy shield.
I'll tell you
I'm
what
trying.
you don't do. Agnostic Cosprey's cock. Don't do that. That was terrible. I was nearly immortal Agnostic's a super great defenseman. Took me like 3.5 minutes to kill a tier 16 boss in just a normal map. Just Mavail was like a 3-minute fight. That was terrible. Don't do that.
All right.
I think
What
could be cool.
are you gonna do next, Balor?
I don't know. Keep going in solo self-found. It's
Oh yeah, you have
Actually-
the goal of beating
Yeah.
NK bosses.
yeah, it's actually really. I got more of a good feeling out of 5 linking my chest in solo self-found that I just did before this podcast than I've gotten from a pile of 3 exalts dropping on the ground. Like that just gets added to the pile of exalts. That doesn't matter. It doesn't even affect my day-to-day play if 3 exalts drop on the ground in a stack. But getting a 5 link in solo self-found made my whole day. So I don't know. That was a weird feeling. So I'm just going to keep going in solo self-found and see how much I like that. I'm actually
Alright.
doing the Spectral Shield Throw Glide that Ziz and Steel put together. I'm making it a little squishier because I don't need to be that tanky, but I'm basically running that exact thing.
It's a very good starter.
I'm
Yep.
looking forward to playing that in my Gauntlet practice.
If I would do it in the Gauntlet.
Does it use necromantic ages?
There's no
no,
damage,
no.
or very little damage. You can't get more than like 1.5 mil.
So you wouldn't recommend it for Gauntlet, is what you're saying?
I don't know, like, yes and no. So you're gonna have very long fights.
I have a question for you, sis. Hard mode gauntlets. Is that a yes or no?
100%.
Oh my god.
No, that's gonna be fun.
Yeah, I've seen people express that sentiment in chat many times. It's like, it would be cool to have a Gauntlet where no one can kill Cirrus. No one can kill Maven.
The winner at the end of the week will be the guy who's killed 1 Guardian successfully.
Hard mode Gauntlet, though, would probably be on top of a normal Gauntlet. And because I don't know if I would waste like a league where everybody can join for that. Because realistically, very few people would want to play that, I think.
Yeah, it would be an extra event, I get that.
Possible.
Like, it's literally like hard mode Gauntlet. If it sounds like, that sounds like it would be harder than the old Blampt. And in the old Blampt, it took people a day to kill Malachi Knight 4.
Yeah. That shit was amazing, though.
It's crazy, dude. The amount of farm you had to
Oh,
do
yeah.
before you get into Brutus.
That's
Give me
true.
Blamp back. Anyway, it's a whole other topic. I want Blamp.
Oh, on Blampt too.
Yeah,
Did you say Blamf?
Blampt.
Blamp.
Yeah, when Balor said it, it sounded like it was an F instead of a T.
That's just me being lazy with my mouth.
All right, makes sense. All right. Well, on that note, I think before we burst the 3-hour mark, I want to thank you for coming on, Zizaran, Ghazzy, BalorMage. Links are in the chat. I'll post them again. They will be in the description below the video and in the description of the audio version of the podcast. If you missed the beginning of the podcast, you can watch it in full 24 to 48 hours from now on my YouTube, and it will be on Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Deezer, and everywhere where you can listen to podcasts that's not super obscure and tiny. And the next episode, we don't know exactly when that's going to be yet, because next weekend we'll have the Badger Private League, which I suppose at least 3 of us are joining. Ghazzy, are you joining as well?
The Badger League? I am not sure yet.
Do it.
It's likely.
Badger
I
Private
made the
League.
decision for him. He's joining.
Yeah, it's a super fun event, very well
okay.
organized. Badger has like an entire team around it and is doing very great work for the community there. It's always a very fun thing to look forward to. And yeah, so somewhere in the next week we'll announce when the next Fated Connections will be and who you can expect to be on there. And until then, wish you a wonderful time in Path of Exile and see you then. Bye-bye.